Chapter 312. Renbachien and the Empress left the hospital and went straight to Furong Street. This street was located in the center of Quanqing and was famous for its snacks. Both of them felt very excited when they arrived at this place. For the rest of the journey, both of them had a clear division of labor. Renbachien was in charge of buying while the Empress was in charge of eating. Basically, as long as there were slightly more people in front of the store, both of them would go one round. Teppanyaki super large squid, transparent shrimp dumplings, octopus meatballs, transparent shrimp dumplings, grilled cheese, smoke ice cream, fried pork tripe, rujiamo, pineapple rice. The two of them didn't care about the surrounding scenery at all. All their thoughts were on eating. Renbachien and Renbachien couldn't help but be envious of the Empress's appetite. The entire street was filled with food. Both of them had eaten more than 2,000 snacks that ranged from a few dollars to more than $10. Of these snacks, 99% were eliminated by the Empress. Humans were far from achieving this level of strength. It was unknown how many foodies wished to eat all over the street, but unfortunately, no one could achieve it. After eating for more than 3 hours, even though some of the dishes didn't taste that good, they were fresh. Most of them were dishes that the Empress had never seen before. This made her feel that this trip wasn't as boring as before. Just taking a stroll around here was already worth it. Even though the Empress had a good appetite, there were still some things that she couldn't eat. For example, she threw the stinky tofu to Renbachien. Since then, she consciously kept a 1-meter distance from him. She always felt that he had a stinky smell, which made Renbachien feel aggrieved. Stinky tofu tastes delicious, okay? The two of them wandered around outside as if they had nothing to do, while the others could only watch from afar. After all, there was an incident where Renbachien opened fire after being disturbed. Chenshi had a deep impression of it. If he had a choice, he wouldn't want to disturb the two of them while they were shopping. Chenshi had long sensed that these two people were just docile donkeys. As long as he did not provoke them, nothing would happen. He would just live like an ordinary person, shopping, watching television at home, going out to eat. For people like them to have superhuman strength and not stir up any trouble and keep such a low profile, it was really surprising. He had a good impression of the two of them. Sometimes, when I think about it, maybe this is how a cultivator should be. After all, the difference in their levels was too great, and their pursuits were different as well. Therefore, they did not care much about the money and status that everyone in the world pursued. However, if someone provoked them, then they would be in big trouble. The two of them would definitely not be lenient. Just like this incident, it seemed like a small matter to many people. As long as Renbachien gave a call, someone would immediately handle it. But he didn't even say a word and just charged over. This was too much for them to handle. Chenshi also made up his mind to spend more effort on Papa Ren, Mama Ren, and Ren Wanyan. At the same time, he had another idea. He would recruit Ren Wanyan into a certain department, which would definitely be of great use in the future. It seemed like Renbachien still cared about his family. Even though he didn't go home often, he made a lot of phone calls. He was no different from an ordinary person who drifted outside. Renbachien and the Empress ate all over the street and finally returned to the hotel. The hotel had a suite with 2 bedrooms and a big living room. After the Empress came back, she didn't even change her clothes. In a flash, she landed on the sofa and naturally turned on the television. Renbachien felt that the Empress's daily routine was to eat, watch television, eat, sleep, eat, watch television, an endless cycle. Every time he thought of this problem, he felt that he had committed a grave sin. Just as he threw off his shoes and sat on the sofa, he heard a knock on the door. Coming. Renbachien thought to himself. He dragged his slippers over to open the door and saw a man standing outside. He was about 35 to 40 years old. His looks were ordinary, but he looked very calm. "Hello, Mr. Ren. My name is Wang Zijuan. I have something to discuss with you. Can we talk inside? Wang Zijuan nodded slightly and revealed a friendly smile. However, he didn't shake hands with him. Come in. Ren Baqian opened the door. He threw off his slippers and sat cross-legged on the sofa. He pointed to the side and said, "Make yourself at home." Sorry to disturb you. Wang Zijuan smiled and sat on the single-seater sofa at the side. The lives of the two of you are really enviable. Unlike us who are always busy, Wang Zijuan said with a smile. Ren Baqian nodded and didn't reply. He had no intention of making small talk anyway. The Empress hugged a pillow and used the remote control to search for her favorite program. Mr. Ren, I'm from the Ministry of Security. I'll be straight to the point. It's like this. We have already understood what happened to your younger brother. There's definitely no problem with the school, so you don't have to worry. Although the people from the Liu family are a little annoying, they are just ordinary people. Compared to you, they are like heaven and earth. You don't have to worry about them. Why don't you let us handle them? They will learn a lesson from this incident. Ren Baqian heard this and knew that this was a typical case of turning a big problem into a small one and then turning a small one into nothing. This was the end of the matter. However, how could Ren Baqian let this matter end like this? He smiled faintly and said, although mosquitoes are small, they still have to be swatted to death. Wang Zijuan heard this and realized that it was just as he had expected. After hearing the whole story, he had already guessed that this would happen. Why don't we let them apologize to you? After all, you said that you would abide by the law after coming back. There's no need to go against your words for these ordinary people. It's not worth it for a person like you to waste your energy on these people, Wang Zijuan immediately said. Ren Baqian shook his head and said, at that time, I said that if no one provoked me, I would definitely abide by the law. Moreover, I was already very restrained. Otherwise, I would have swatted them to death today. Isn't that simple and direct? Why do you have to say so much nonsense? He changed the topic and said, actually, rather than trying to persuade me, why don't you persuade those people? It's just a tongue, what's there to be reluctant about? They won't die anyway. Keeping that thing around will be a disaster for some people. Who knows when they might die from it? Wang Zijuan smiled bitterly and said, you must be joking, Mr. Ren. We are currently cooperating with each other, and both of us are very satisfied with our cooperation. The higher-ups also hope that we can continue to cooperate in a friendly manner and don't want this matter to affect both of us. That's none of my business. You see, I don't lack money, nor do I lack anything else. The so-called cooperation is more like I've made a certain sacrifice for the progress of the people of the world. I've taken out something that belongs to me. Although it's in the name of cooperation, you guys have gained more than me. Oh, in that case, I'm really quite great. Ren Baqian thought about it and felt that he was indeed very great. Look, I'm such a noble person, a pure person, a moral person, a person who has broken away from vulgar interests, and a person who is beneficial to the people. Ren Baqian was all smiles. He suddenly realized that he was actually so great, and he felt a little excited. Wang Zijuan was speechless. He really didn't know how to respond to Ren Baqian's words. Sure enough, it was as difficult to deal with as described in the information. Mr. Ren, let's talk about it. How do you think we can resolve this matter? Wang Zijuan asked bluntly. I want those 2 tongues. I'm a man of my word. If I say I want 2, I definitely don't want 3. If I say I want to kill their entire family, I won't leave a single one alive. Of course, at this time, I'm just giving them a small punishment to tell them that they can't be too ruthless. The heavens are watching what we do. Of course, if you are willing to put them in cement cans and throw them into the river, that's fine with me. Whether it's from a legal or moral point of view, what Mr. Ren is doing is illegal and too ruthless. Our duty is to protect the people. It's impossible for us to watch Mr. Ren do such a thing. Wang Zijuan felt a headache coming on. Did I really go too far? Ren Baqian turned to look at the Empress with a puzzled look. If it were me, I would have smacked them to death. If anyone has any objections, I will smack them to death too. The Empress finally shifted her gaze away from the television with a look of disgust. You see, I'm too soft-hearted. Ren Baqian turned his head and spread out his hands. Mr. Ren. Wang Zijuan was interrupted by Ren Baqian before he could finish his sentence. I've already said what I wanted to say. There's no need to say anything else. You can try to stop us, but I suggest that you persuade them. Goodbye, remember to close the door. Ren Baqian waved his hand. Seeing that there was no way to negotiate, Wang Zijuan left the room with a gloomy face. After he left, Ren Baqian smiled. He was very satisfied with his previous attitude. His attitude was very amiable and had already expressed his goodwill. You said that it depends on whether they are smart or not. If they are smart, what should we do? The Empress was a little curious. Ren Baqian had already spoken so harshly. She didn't know how Ren Baqian was going to end this matter. Your Majesty, you have to give me some rewards before I can tell you. Ren Baqian turned his head and spoke in a tone that sounded like he was asking for benefits. His face was full of anticipation. For example, he would tell her if she gave him a kiss or if he gave her a kiss. Then, he was kicked off the sofa by the Empress. Chen Shi received the news. After smoking 2 cigarettes, he frowned and said, "Arrest those people from the Liu family for extortion." Initially, he didn't have any good ideas. However, the Liu family had asked Mama Ren for 100,000 yuan in medical fees. This matter could be either big or small, and he could use it now. This could also be considered as protecting the few of them. Otherwise, if Ren Baqian and Qi Zixiao really wanted to do something, it would be very difficult to stop them. What should they do then? Fall out with them? Or should they pretend that nothing happened? No matter what they did, it wasn't appropriate. On the contrary, this was the most suitable way. According to the regulations, 100,000 yuan was considered a huge amount of extortion and extortion. They would be sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. Since this was an attempt, their sentence would be reduced and they would be released in 1 to 2 years. By then, Ren Baqian would have long forgotten about it. This family wasn't any good people. This time, it could be considered as giving them a long memory. Lu Jing was still waiting in the hospital. At this moment, she had an unbridled look on her face. Those 4 bags of money were placed beside her. And when her husband just heard about this matter, he was a little speechless. That person is really courting death. Judging from his behavior, I don't know how many crimes he has committed. He should have been arrested a long time ago. It would be best if he was executed immediately, Lu Jing sneered. There was nothing more satisfying than someone threatening you right in front of you, only to be arrested and thrown into prison the next moment. Are they going to take the money away? Papa Lu asked. At this moment, he was starting to have some ideas. Even if they could get tens of thousands of yuan in medical fees, it would still be good. It's okay. After such a big incident, I don't believe that the family won't fork out the money. When that happens, it won't just be a matter of 100,000 yuan. They also deserved it. Wouldn't it be over if they settled it earlier? They insisted that I go to the school. Now, the younger one is being punished by the school, and the older one is also going to jail. Lu Jing felt that she had already won, and that the Ren family was going to be in big trouble. Be careful in the future. If you really offend someone you can't afford to offend, it will be troublesome, Lu Jing's husband said. What are you afraid of? Lu Jing said disdainfully. Do you think I don't know what I'm doing? When a few police officers came in, Lu Jing immediately went up to them and asked, "Has that person been arrested?" At this time, other than this matter, she couldn't think of any other reason for the police to come here. They were probably here to inform her. "Are you Lu Jing?" one of them asked. "Yes, I am," Lu Jing said with a relaxed expression. "You are suspected of extortion and blackmail. Come with us. This is a detention warrant." The police did not say anything else and directly handcuffed her. The sudden change of events stunned everyone in the room. How did it become Lu Jing's arrest? Is there a mistake? Lu Jing's eyes widened as she asked in a shrill voice. "Lu Man, Lu Mingjing, take them away too." This time, everyone was dumbfounded. Even Lu Jing's husband, who had just arrived, was stunned. How did this happen so suddenly? That night, when Renbaqian received the news, he said to the Empress, "See, there are always smart people in this world. I can't possibly chase them to the detention center, can I? This way, I can express my attitude and save myself the trouble." "Humph," the Empress raised her head and snorted, ignoring him. Renbaqian listened to her voice and felt that it was a little cute. He called his parents and told them that the matter had been resolved. Then, they chatted for a while. Then, he lay on the sofa and watched the Empress's swaying figure walk into the room. He was in a daze for a while and then sighed. Now, his relationship with the Empress was pretty good. He was getting more and more familiar with the Empress's character. In some aspects, the Empress was also becoming more and more like a girl. However, the difference in strength was too big. Even if they were married now, Renbaqian felt that he would be unlucky on the day of their wedding night. He still had to work hard. After the Empress closed the door, Renbaqian thought for a while and lay back on the bed to practice the visualization of wood. Once again, he appeared in the world where there was only a towering tree. The Empress heard the noise outside. She sat on the bed with a slight smile on her face. She rolled a few times on the bed, hugged a pillow, and pondered for a while before falling asleep. The night passed. Early the next morning, the two of them set off for Shicheng and conveniently displayed a wave of public display of affection on the plane. Qinsher heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this news. Sure enough, it was as he had expected. The matter was resolved just like that. Chapter 313. In this world, nothing is eternal. Water can turn into steam, it can also freeze. Stones can be weathered into sand and dust. Metals can also be turned into liquid under high temperatures. Under changing conditions, nothing is eternal, Renbaqian said to everyone on the stage. Everyone listened to him obediently. Although they looked a little older and stronger, they were different from ordinary primary schools in remote mountainous areas. However, they were essentially the same. Renbaqian had learned to ignore the surface and look at the essence. At least on this matter. Renbaqian had already started to consider whether to customize their uniforms. There were also red scarves in 1, 2, 3 stripes. However, Renbaqian felt that they could be changed to 1 knife, 2 knives, all the way to 9 knives. After a period of time, everyone had become familiar with this new life and their new identities. Their interest was also aroused. After all, many of the things that Renbaqian talked about were unheard of and even unthinkable. Some of the content was acceptable, while others were difficult to accept. For example, Renbaqian's words just now. Renbaqian was very satisfied. Although it hadn't been long, this group of naughty kids had finally learned to raise their hands and ask questions under the care of his gun. The bandages on several students were the price of love. He couldn't rule out the possibility that 2 of them were accidentally injured, but he didn't care too much about these details. Speak. Renbaqian used a pointer made of pure iron and as thick as a finger to point at a young man below. The heroic spirits of our ancestors are eternal. They have always been protecting us, the young man suddenly said loudly. Renbochin tilted his head and looked at him. His gaze made the young man feel a little uneasy and vigilant. That's right. There are still some things in this world that people can't detect, including the heroic spirits of our ancestors. Therefore, what I'm teaching now is the basic structure of the world, the things that have been discovered, and the things that are currently unknown will be handed over to you. Science is about standing on the shoulders of the predecessors and constantly discovering the unknown, not denying the unknown. I hope you all remember this. Renbochin smiled very calmly. He didn't deny the existence of those heroic spirits, just like how Earth couldn't deny the existence of ghosts. These were all unknown things that hadn't been discovered yet, but it didn't mean that they didn't exist. Just like how he had not found the reason for his transmigration, it did not mean that it did not exist. It only meant that he had not discovered it yet. Renbochin's calm smile made many of the students heave a sigh of relief. They were also somewhat elated. This was a rare affirmation from Renbochin. Tonglan supported her chin with one hand and grinned. In her heart, she was laughing at the bunch of idiots around her. The world is made up of molecules, atoms, and ions. This is the foundation of the world. These invisible molecules, compounds, and ions make up all the matter in this world. Teacher, since we can't see it, how do we know if what you said is true? Someone immediately raised his hand and asked. You can't see the molecules with an optical microscope. You need an electron microscope. If the conditions are right in the future, I will make a set for you. In addition, there are many other ways to verify it. I will explain them to you in the future, Renbochin said faintly. Immediately, someone asked what an optical microscope and an electron microscope were. Renbochin gave simple answers to these questions. Usually, the physics class went well, and Renbochin was in a good mood. Therefore, the physics class was held in the first period. Today, we will do an experiment on the transformation of the structure of water. First, under normal atmospheric pressure, water will reach its boiling point at 100 degrees Celsius and turn from water into water vapor. Renbochin spoke with fervor and assurance as he placed a small pot, an alcohol stove, and a thermometer on the desk. Come, let's take a look. The thermometer has reached 80 degrees Celsius, and 100 degrees Celsius is the boiling point of water. As Renbochin spoke, everyone craned their necks to take a look. Although everyone knew that water would turn into water vapor after boiling, this was the first time such a formal experiment was conducted. Many people were very interested. Then, everyone watched as the temperature of the water exceeded 100,101,102,103. 110 degrees. Alright, it has now been proven that under normal atmospheric pressure, water will boil at 110 degrees Celsius and turn into gas. At this pressure, the temperature of the water will also be maintained at 110 degrees Celsius. Renbochin extinguished the alcohol stove and threw it out of the window along with the pot. Teacher, you said 100 degrees Celsius just now. Tonglan's eyes were bright and full of expression. The atmospheric pressure isn't constant. It varies from region to region. Usually, the higher the altitude, the lower the atmospheric pressure. Here, it's 110 degrees Celsius. You just have to remember that the higher the atmospheric pressure, the higher the boiling point, and the lower the atmospheric pressure, the lower the boiling point. This was the first time Renbochin realized that the atmospheric pressure in this world was actually different from that on Earth. This also reminded him once again that although he didn't feel much difference, this world was, after all, a different world. There were still many things that were different from that on Earth. In order to develop technology in this world, everything had to be verified little by little. Otherwise, he might get slapped in the face again. Next, he used saltpeter to turn water into ice in front of everyone. This surprised everyone and immediately reminded them of the shaved ice that was sold outside. This lesson talked about the two forms of water transformation. When the lesson was about to end, Renbochin asked someone to move the teaching materials that he had brought back from the next room and distributed them to everyone. "Teacher, what are these?" "Your future learning materials are from my country." Everyone knew that Renbochin wasn't from Dayo. However, not many people knew which country Renbochin was from. "I come from a very distant country. It's so far away that you will never be able to reach it in your lifetime. Our country is very different from this world. In our country, people prefer to study the nature of the world. In our opinion, the degree of understanding of the world will become one's strength and allow one to achieve things that were previously impossible. For example, a machine that can run faster than a galloping horse, a machine that can fly in the air, a machine that can lift objects that weigh 100,000 kilograms or even 500,000 kilograms. This was also the first time that Renbochin frankly talked about some things about Earth to someone other than the Empress. Previously, he was afraid that people would know that he had a lot of good things in his hands and set their eyes on him. As a result, he didn't dare to say much. However, with the change in his status, he no longer needed to worry about this and naturally didn't need to hide it. Furthermore, he had already exposed a lot of things. Instead of letting them guess, he might as well take this opportunity to briefly explain. There was nothing shameful about it. It was better than letting them guess whether he was from Great Xia or the Yun nation. "Teacher, what's this?" Someone pointed to a picture that had just been flipped open in a physics book. "Is this the machine that you mentioned?" "It's a high-speed rail that can travel more than 1,200 kilometers in 2 hours without any rest. A place that would normally take a few days to reach on a galloping horse can be reached in just 2 to 4 hours. If Dayo had this, it would only take 4 hours to reach Ping City from here. If anything happens, our army can reach Ping City in 4 hours." Renbochin's words caused everyone to look surprised. One had to know that it would take half a month to travel from Lon City to Ping City by carriage and 3 to 4 days on a galloping horse. If there was a war, they would be able to provide support at any time with this thing. Furthermore, battle reports could be sent back at any time. This was too valuable. Most of the people present were the children of officials. Even if they weren't very talented or reckless, they could still think of this thing. If you want to build a high-speed rail, you need a lot of things. I can teach you, but it's up to you when it can be built. Renbochin smiled. He liked to see the excitement and anticipation on the faces of these students as it gave him a sense of accomplishment. Following which, he told the students some other things. The students felt as if they were listening to a book from heaven, and all of them widened their eyes. Tong Lan and Shirgan didn't get distracted and listened attentively. However, this joyous atmosphere didn't last for long. During the second lesson, Renbochin's roar was heard again. During the mathematics class, gunshots were heard. Chapter 3:14. Is that what Principal Ren said? Tong Jingye was shocked to hear Tong Lan's words. That high-speed rail thing was actually so fast. It was simply terrifying. With this thing, Dayo could send reinforcements in all directions at any time. For example, they could mobilize the troops from the Protectorate of the South and the Protectorate of the Southeast to the north and send them out directly. If what Principal Ren said was true, it would be close to the means of the gods. This is the thing. Tong Lan took out a book, flipped open the cover, and pointed at something for Tong Jingye to see. I don't know if he's bragging. Tong Jingye stroked his beard and looked at it carefully for a long time, firmly remembering the image. Don't talk nonsense. Principal Ren is truly capable, Tong Jingye said in a deep voice. He was aware of the few things that Renbochin had done. Renbochin had the most dealings with the Ministry of Works, so he recognized him the most. Renbochin's official position had also changed. He was now the principal of Black Bamboo Academy, the highest and only academy in Dayo, and his official rank was secondary class, rank 4. Speaking of which, Rinpoche's promotion speed was extremely fast. He couldn't even beat me and sent me flying with a flick of my finger. Tong Lan curled her lips. You can't say that. Even though some people don't have extraordinary martial arts skills, they are better than many others in other aspects. There are many such people in Great Xia, and Principal Ren is also one of them. At least, the things that he said shocked even me. Tong Jingye shook his head. It seems that sending you to the academy was the right decision. Tong Jingye was quite proud of his gaze when he mentioned this matter. When he took the initiative to send Tong Lan to the academy, her father didn't approve of it. Now, it seemed that it was the right decision. I feel that I've become stupid after being with a bunch of fools every day. According to him, being stupid is contagious, and my IQ has been dragged down. Tong Lan pouted unhappily. Besides Tong Jingye, who often asked Tong Lan what she had learned, the families of the other students would also ask about it from time to time. The main reason was that Rinpoche's initial explanation of everything in the world had shocked them. However, these days, these juniors who were sent to Black Bamboo Academy had learned a lot of strange knowledge, and no one knew if it was good or bad. Lao Lu, let's go out for a drink. In a remote courtyard of a residence, a door was suddenly pushed open, and a tall and burly young man in a robe strode in. A young man sitting at the table was tempted. He hadn't gone out for a drink for a few days. In the past, it was unimaginable. In the past, a group of brothers would go out drinking and having fun almost every night. Now, they would sit in the house and do homework every night. Lon, let's go. That girl said she hadn't seen you for a few days. I said she missed you. The big man patted his shoulder and said. At the mention of that girl, the young man who was addressed as Old Six was even more tempted, and he almost agreed. However, he recalled what Rinpoche had said before. Rinpoche's right. Dong Tong said, Bachien Jingye the Yi, that he Yi, said. Lon. Ren, Lon, I said. I have Ren has young people's Tian is yang is yang is has yang, teacher is yang is. There are 2 more days until my rest day. I'll go out for a drink then. Yague was the nickname they gave Rinpoche. Yague was a monkey-like animal in the 60,000 mountains, but it was ferocious, fast, and strong. In their eyes, Rinpoche was similar to Yague. He looked thin and weak, but he was ferocious. Lao Lu, when did you become so timid? You are like a sissy from Great Xia. The burly man was surprised. Lao Lu used to be very bold, but he didn't expect him to become so timid after being sent to Black Bamboo Academy for half a month. He didn't even dare to drink, let alone do his homework. Get lost, don't disturb my homework. Lao Lu scolded and ignored him. He continued to work on his math problems with a bitter look on his face. 3 times 9 is 18, 7 times 7 is 56, the next day. Bang! A gunshot was heard from the Black Bamboo Academy. School doctor. Su Wei shouted loudly. Coming, coming. A bold burly man, who was thinner and weaker than the aboriginals, came out of the room with a package. Bang! Before he could enter the classroom, another gunshot was heard. Rinpoche cursed, I'm going to kill all of you idiots. Treat his wound first. Use the black mud cream to treat it. I will shoot him for 5 minutes today. 2 days later, the young man called Lao Lu and Du Lao Lu were sitting in a restaurant with a few friends. It had been 5 days, and he finally saw some wine. Without hesitation, he drank a jar. Ha! After drinking a jar of wine, Du Lao Lu heaved a long sigh of relief. Why don't you come out recently? I heard that you do something until midnight every night. A pretty young girl with a voluptuous figure said. She scolded him fiercely at first, but her words turned into curiosity at the end. Sigh. Dulalio's heart ached at the mention of this. Look. Dulaolu pulled down his shirt and pointed at his shoulders and arms, which were covered with pale circles that were whiter than the rest of his body. They were all done by Yague. Not only here, but also on my legs. Yague. The people around him were curious. It's the principal of the academy. Du Changkong complained gloomily about Renbachian's atrocities. The people around him burst into laughter. Why don't you come back like Taizé? Du Laolu was silent for a while before replying, Brothers, I'm not like you. Even if my talent isn't amazing, it's still passable. In my case, I will most likely end up like what the principal said. I will be raised at home and become a good-for-nothing. At least now is an opportunity. Everyone was silent after hearing this. In fact, many people had people like Du Laolu in their families. Although there weren't many of them, everyone knew that they could often see them. It wouldn't matter if they were commoners. However, in their families, having such talent was a sin in itself. Du Laolu wasn't talented, but he was loyal and smart. Therefore, he got along well with everyone, and everyone was willing to invite him out to play. However, they also knew that if nothing changed, Du Laolu would probably remain the same in the future. Therefore, no one could refute Du Laolu's words. Can we really learn something there? The pretty girl asked. Du Laolu nodded. Although he didn't know what use the things he learned now, other than mathematics, would be in the future, he believed that he would be able to learn something. In that case, I will look for you to play on your days off. The girl smiled and her eyes lit up. Du Laolu nodded and was very grateful for what she said. He swore to himself that he would definitely learn something so that he wouldn't become a good-for-nothing in the future and then marry her. Chapter 3:15. There was a ripple in the air. Renbachian appeared in Pingle Park, sitting on a mechanical monster that was made up of various metal parts and had a wheel on each side. That's right, Renbachian brought one back from Earth to show the students what a technological product was. Even though that bunch of idiots often made him furious, he was still very attentive. This was because he saw something in those students that he didn't have in the past. The desire to learn. The thirst for knowledge. Even though they were a little stupid and their minds were filled with muscles and sakuma, at least they would do their homework every day. Renbachian was very satisfied with this point. The motorcycle was a cruising prince. It was a Benda origin beast that was launched in China last year and weighed more than 170 kilograms. The body of the motorcycle was compact and full of muscles. For the people in this world, it should be full of sci-fi. He took off 2 big bags and a box from the back of the motorcycle, checked them, and hung another bag. Besides the Empress's snacks, a thumb drive filled with television dramas, solar street lights, batteries, and solar panels. After putting everything down, Renbachian exerted force with both hands, shouted softly, and picked up the motorcycle to put it down in the courtyard. Then, he put on his sunglasses and stepped on the starting lever. When the motorcycle roared, he had no choice but to stop. A chubby fellow was hugging the motorcycle's tire and rubbing against it. Get lost! Renbachian shouted. Then, another panda eagerly came over and hugged his leg. Sir! What kind of monster is this? The guard outside heard the noise and wanted to come in to ask what was going on. Then, he saw the monster that Renbachian was sitting on. Take these 2 fellows away. Renbachian waved his hand. After that guard carried the 2 pandas by their necks to the side, Renbachian stepped on the starting lever, turned the accelerator, and directly drove out of Pingle Park. What kind of monster is this? Just as he left the courtyard, he met a group of guards. The person in front almost pulled out his saber and slashed at him. He was a classic example of a person whose hands reacted faster than his brain. "Spare him, spare the motorcycle," Ren Bachin quickly shouted. He was almost scared to death by that reckless fellow. That person quickly withdrew his saber. "Can't you see that I'm up there?" Ren Bachin clenched his teeth. "Sir Ren." The 5 guards quickly cupped their hands. "When I heard the roar and saw this thing, I thought it was a monster. Sir Ren, please don't blame me." Ren Bachin gritted his teeth. This bunch of muscleheads. The few of them looked at Ren Bachin, who had ground 2 black gemstones into thin slices and hung them in front of his eyes. Recently, many adults seemed to like these things very much. Every day, they would look up at the sky with these things on their heads. Then, he shifted his gaze to the motorcycle that Ren Bachin was sitting on. "Sir Ren, what is this?" "This is my new ride." Make way, make way. Let me show you." Ren Bachin and the rest made way for them. Then, he stepped on the accelerator and sped off with a roar. "What monster?" "Spare the chariot," the same voice came from afar. The guards were still in a daze. What exactly was Sir Ren's new mount? They didn't have legs. Instead, they were 2 things that looked like carriage tires. "This item is extraordinary," someone said enviously. The others nodded in agreement. This mount was much more powerful than riding a horned cow. Along the way, Ren Bachin was almost killed a few times. He was so angry that he cursed out loud. Fortunately, when he arrived at Yangshin Palace Hall, he carried the Empress's snacks in. The Empress was still watching television. Recently, she had been obsessed with it. In the past, when she had nothing to do, she would call for 2 musicians. Ever since she had a laptop, the few musicians in the palace were almost out of work. "What was that sound just now?" the Empress turned her head and asked. That sound was inexplicably familiar. A motorcycle. Ren Bachin smiled and opened his bag. He took out 2 bottles of wine and placed them at the side. Then, he took out the Empress's favorite ice cream and said, "It's still cold and hasn't melted." The Empress took the ice cream, wrinkled her nose slightly, and looked very satisfied. "Dang dang dang dang, and your favorite popcorn." Ren Bachin took out 2 buckets of popcorn from his bag and instantly appeared in the Empress's hands. Following which, the Empress stuffed all kinds of chocolates and candies into the cracks of the sofa. In the past, he didn't pay much attention to these things. Now, Ren Bachin finally knew where the Empress usually hid her snacks. He took out a few packets of potato chips, placed the empty bag at the side, and sat on the sofa. His fingers intertwined as if they were dancing on the sofa. The moment he touched the Empress's palm, he heard a slap. Ren Bachin nonchalantly touched the back of his hand. He couldn't remember who once said, "Get used to being beaten and beaten." This sentence was very reasonable. "You said that there might be salt in the mountains." The Empress suddenly thought of this problem after watching a television series for a while and seeing the dishes on the television series. Salt was still very important to Dayo. The price of salt in Dayo had always been limited by people. Let's wait for another month. First, teach them some basic knowledge, then bring them for an outing in the mountains. Ren Bachin thought for a while and said. Now that he had just gotten on the right track, he really didn't want to abandon this group of students and run into the mountains. It would be better to wait for another month until the beginning of March. At that time, he would be able to demonstrate a chemistry experiment to them. Of course, the prerequisite was that the lake was as he imagined it to be. Those people in the south are being dishonest again. A few days ago, we found a lot of crossbows made in the Yun nation and chopped off the heads of more than 300 people. However, this matter isn't over yet, the Empress said faintly with a trace of killing intent in her voice. Renbochin rubbed his head. He had long heard about the situation in the south from the Empress. He also had some ideas, but it required time. He still had to go and see for himself. Let's put this matter aside for now. If there are any disobedient people, we can just chop them off. In any case, we have to chop them off sooner or later. It's not a pity to chop off those fools who expose themselves so easily. The rest are those who are honest or well hidden. I will see how to deal with them when the time comes. Renbochin was a little hesitant. Should he kidnap an elite MLM from Earth? Those guys were definitely much stronger than him in this aspect. However, that kind of person was a double-edged sword. If used well, the problem in the south would be easily solved. If not, it might cause even more trouble. Renbochin also felt that kidnapping a monk could have the same effect. However, it was also a double-edged sword. He wondered what would happen if he set up a religion in the south. It seemed that the effect would be better and it would be easier to control. If he combined the MLM model with religion, the effect would be fast and it would be easy to control. Furthermore, if he thought about it in the long run, this kind of religion could also dissolve the antagonism between the Aboriginals and the How Nation's immigrants. As for what this religion would become after his death, according to Renbochin's opinion, the future generations would have their own blessings. Chapter 316. The next day, Renbochin rode the motorcycle under the escort of the ox riders. He was exceptionally eye-catching. Ever since he left the palace, he had attracted a lot of eyeballs. This was the first time they had seen such a thing in Dayo, especially when it made such a strange roar. Even Su Wei and the rest would occasionally glance at Renbochin and the monster he was riding. On this day, when the students entered the academy, they saw the strange thing standing at the side. A group of people surrounded the motorcycle and curiously touched it. It was very hard and seemed to be made of metal. However, the black color on the outside didn't seem to be a common dye, so they couldn't figure out what exactly it was. Many people would eat 2 rolls on the road and touch the motorcycle, leaving a pile of greasy claw marks. What's this? I don't know. Is it made by the teacher? This is the machine that the teacher mentioned. Look at this, it's all made of iron. It looks weird, but it's a little light. I don't know what it's used for. A student lifted the motorcycle above his head and spun it a few times before putting it back in its original position. Tonglan, what are you doing? A short person suddenly squeezed in from the crowd. After touching the motorcycle a few times, she used her fingers to scratch it. Aya, you left a mark, someone immediately shouted. A bunch of fools. This is the color of the outside, Tonglan said in disdain. She used her fingers to scratch a long mark on the motorcycle. Renbochin looked at the group of students surrounding the motorcycle from afar and didn't mind at all. This thing was originally meant for them to broaden their horizons. During class, a student asked about it. Renbochin casually said, "You will know later. Previously, we talked about the change of state of matter. Today, let's talk about the phenomenon of light." Turn to page XX in the physics textbook. Renbochin would now read from the textbook during class every day. While learning physics, he also learned how to write. After the class ended for the day, Renbochin walked to the side of the motorcycle and saw the scratches on it. He grinned and didn't blame them. Then, he sat on the motorcycle, stepped on the start lever, and twisted the accelerator. The motorcycle immediately emitted a loud roar, and the 2 pipes at the back started to emit smoke. This gave the students a shock. How could this thing fart so loudly? Renbochin then galloped away like a wild dog that had escaped its leash. The group of guards hurriedly shouted and followed him. This thing can actually be ridden, and it can even run, some students said in surprise. It seems very fun. Tonglan's eyes sparkled. She was not the only one with stars in her eyes. Many of the people around her did the same. After all, this thing was too novel. It did not have long legs, but it could still run. Riding this thing on the streets wasn't just flashy, it was simply coquettish. Renbochin rode back to the palace in an extremely coquettish manner. A few big shots who had just come out of the palace were shocked when they saw the thing that Renbochin was riding. Principal Ren, what kind of mount is this? Tong Jinye came over and touched it curiously like a country bumpkin. Where's the mouth? How do I feed it? Without waiting for Renbochin's reply, she grabbed him by the collar and pulled him down. Then, she rode on him and knocked one of her legs on the side of the car. Why aren't you leaving? Tong Jinye became curious again. Looking at Tong Jinye's bumpkin appearance, Renbochin ridiculed him with his nose in the air. After sending Tong Jinye and the rest away with great difficulty, Renbochin returned to the palace. The next morning, the students were still circling around the motorcycle like yesterday. Did Yague ride it like this yesterday? One of them looked outside and did not see Renbochin. Hence, he copied Renbochin and sat on it. What happened next? How can it move? The group of students looked at each other. They were too busy looking at this thing yesterday and did not see how Yague made it move. On this day, after school, all the students looked at Renbochin with bright and piercing eyes as he rode off on his motorcycle. Did you see that? How did it move? I saw its legs move twice. It looked like it was stepping on the ground. Its wrist also twisted. First the left hand, then the right hand. It should be like this. After school on the third day, the group of students continued to watch Renbochin's movements. It was basically the same as yesterday, and they had actually memorized all of Renbochin's movements. Early in the morning on the fourth day, Tonglan carried her bowl and stood on the four-corned cow. She walked while eating so that she could go to school earlier to play with that thing. When she arrived at the door, she stuck her head out and looked inside. She did not see Renbochin, but she saw that thing in the corner. There were two bastards who were even faster than her. One of them was sitting on the motorcycle and imitating Renbochin's movements by stepping on a small pole at the side. In a flash, Tonglan appeared behind the two of them and shot the person on the motorcycle into the wall. She then sat on the motorcycle and said, "I will play with it first. I will return it to you after I am done." The person who was shot into the wall was called Su Peng. He got up from the ground with a resentful look on his face. In order to play with this thing, he specially came over early in the morning. In the end, it was snatched away by this girl who was only half his height. However, he could not defeat this girl. Tonglan sat on the motorcycle and snorted. Then, a smile blossomed on her face. She held on to the handlebars with both hands and kicked the starting lever with one leg. She did not kick it. Tonglan's face immediately turned green. Her legs were actually not long enough. Ha 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 ha. Su Peng and Du Laolu, who were dissatisfied that Tonglan had snatched the right to play this thing from them, immediately burst into laughter. It was really funny to see Tonglan's short legs kicking and kicking, but she just could not reach it. Renbochin, who was standing in front of the window and watching this scene from afar, burst into laughter. He quickly picked up his phone and wanted to take a picture of this scene. It would definitely be a dark history in the future. However, by the time he picked up his phone, Tonglan had already flown into a rage out of humiliation. She flipped over on the motorcycle and kicked Du Lalio's head from above, causing him to fall to the ground. She then flashed and appeared in front of Su Peng. She used one hand to deflect his fist and hit his chest with her head. Boom! A hole immediately appeared on the wall. Su Peng was nowhere to be seen. "Sir, it won't be damaged, right?" Su Wei, who was standing behind Tonglan, was a little worried. This thing must be very valuable, and it would be a pity if it was damaged by this group of kids. It's okay. Renbochin waved his hand. This could also stimulate the student's interest in learning. This thing was nothing to him. It was just a little troublesome to bring it over from Earth. Tonglan was still unconvinced. After she beat the two of them to the ground, she tilted her body and started the motorcycle. She didn't even bother with the bracket, twisted the accelerator, and sped away. The motorcycle flipped over in less than 3 seconds. At the moment when it flipped, Tonglan jumped and landed on the ground, causing the motorcycle to flip over. Not fun. Tonglan placed her hands behind her back, raised her small face, and swayed back to the classroom with a proud look on her face. She saw Renbochin's smiling face full of wrinkles as he looked at her from the window. She even made a funny face. Humph. After Tonglan left, Suping flipped over the wall and entered the classroom. His whole body was covered in dust from the cement bricks, and he looked like a demolition worker. While he was still looking around for Tonglan, another person lifted the motorcycle and sat on it. Suping was furious when he saw this. When he looked at that person again, he was immediately filled with anger, but he couldn't let it out. He couldn't beat this person either. Sure gone. The two youngest students in the entire academy were the best at fighting, which made the others very depressed. Shurgan wasn't very old, but he was about 1.7 meters tall and had a strong physique. He rode on the motorcycle with a pleased look on his face. He first tried it out, then tightened the accelerator, stepped on the start lever, and the motorcycle immediately sped away. Renbochin watched as the motorcycle sped like the wind and crashed into the wall. The back of the motorcycle was lifted up, and Shurgan's head was directly hit against the wall. Boom! When the dust settled, the motorcycle was seen lying in front of the courtyard wall. It was already out of shape. There was a big hole in the wall. Shurgan was nowhere to be seen. This bunch of idiots. Renbochin, who was standing behind the window, almost burst out laughing. He had already recorded everything that happened just now, especially Shurgan's happy expression as he sat on the motorcycle and stepped on the start lever. Coupled with what happened 2 seconds later, it was really too funny. If the video was played in slow motion, one could even see the frozen expression on his face the moment he crashed into the wall. Renbochin was prepared to go back and get a video camera so that he could record all of this in the future. After a few years, when they had become the mainstay of the imperial court, he would then show the series of movies, The Growth Log of a Bear Student, to the whole of Dayo. Chapter 317. Tonglan, Shurgan, do the two of you have anything to say about the motorcycle? Renbochin stood on the stage and asked after the day's lessons. He broke it. Tonglan immediately extended her small hand and pointed at Shurgan. It has nothing to do with me. Shurgan was still covered in dirt. After all, he had smashed his head against the brick wall and fell. After hearing Renbochin's words, he put on an innocent expression. If he didn't know that this guy wasn't a good person, he might have been deceived by his expression. Renbochin grinned and looked very sinister. Before him, you had already fallen once. At that time, you were already injured, and there are witnesses and material evidence. Renbochin spread his hands. Anyway, even if I didn't fall, I would still be broken by him, Tonglan immediately retorted. I was walking alone with 150 taels of silver in my pocket. First, you robbed me of 50 taels, and then Shurgan robbed me of 100 taels. It can't be that if you didn't snatch it, the 150 taels of silver would have been snatched away by Shurgan. That doesn't make sense. Dayo's laws are there, Renbochin said as he knocked on the table with his pointer. You have to pay for damaging other people's property. It's as natural as repaying a debt. This principle has to be followed everywhere. After hearing Renbochin's words, Tonglan was so angry that she gritted her teeth. However, this matter was there and couldn't be avoided. Shirgan continued to put on an innocent expression. Teacher, I don't have money, Shirgan said. It was obvious that he didn't have money, but he had his life. I don't have money either. Tong Lan's eyes lit up. It doesn't matter. As your teacher, it's too tacky to talk about money. You see, I have never asked you for tuition fees since you entered the school. This time, I'm not going to ask you to pay. Now, you have two options. Renbochin stretched out 2 fingers. First, fix the motorcycle within 7 days. Second, clean the toilet every day for a month. As soon as Renbochin said this, Tonglan exploded in anger. Impossible. How could such a cute young lady like her clean the toilet? How was that possible? If that was the case, she would probably be called a toilet girl for the rest of her life. How would she get married in the future? Tonglan clenched her fists. The innocent expression on Shirgan's face disappeared and was replaced by widened eyes. If looks could kill, he would have hacked Renbochin into pieces. His father was Shirqing, yet he actually wanted him to clean the toilet. Imparting knowledge and educating people is not only about teaching, but also about educating people. Not only do I have to teach you knowledge, but I also have to teach you how to be a person. Although my heart aches, I have no choice but to do this. Renbochin's face was full of regret. The faces of the 49 people below were bright and full of expression. Who were you trying to fool? Your eyes are twitching from laughing so hard. Do you think we can't see that? If you don't want to clean the toilet, go fix the motorcycle. I'll give you 7 days. If it's not fixed by then, you can only clean the toilet. Don't think of anything else. It's useless even if you bring your 2 fathers here. Renbochin placed the pointer on the lectern, clasped his hands behind his back, hummed a tune, and walked out of the room. The others continued to stare at him with bright eyes. Didn't you have a pained expression on your face just now? What do you mean by your body becoming lighter? As soon as Renbochin left the classroom, there was an uproar. Tonglan smashed the table with her small fist. Following which, she stomped on the table and said, damned Yagüe, I will definitely not let you off. Renbochin suddenly poked his head in again and said, remember to fix the table tomorrow morning. You know the consequences. He even winked at Tonglan, which almost infuriated her to death. After he disappeared, the classroom, which had been quiet for a few seconds, became chaotic again. There were more than 10 other female students in the classroom who supported Tonglan. After all, Tonglan was very pretty, and there were still many female students who felt sorry for her. There were also a few people who laughed heartily. They were Su Peng, Du Lao Lu, and 2 other teenagers who had escaped a calamity in the morning. They laughed happily, but were then shot into the wall by Tonglan. Shirgan stood up from his seat, walked to Renbochin's previous position, cleared his throat, and attracted everyone's attention. Following which, he cupped his hands and said, brothers and sisters, this matter is very important. Please help us. After this, regardless of whether we succeed or not, I will host a banquet at House Shanhui to thank all of you. I won't go home until I'm drunk. Ever since Shirgan entered the school, he rarely interacted with others. In addition, he always looked like he was daydreaming, so many people didn't really like him. However, now that he said this and addressed them as brothers and sisters, it wasn't good for them to stay out of this matter. One after another, they laughed and said, then, we will wait for you to treat us to a drink. Renbochin, who was next door, learned about what happened in the classroom and had a whole new level of respect for Shirgan. Dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and the son of a mouse knew how to dig holes. This saying indeed made sense. In fact, there were 2 people in the school who didn't fit in with the crowd. One was Tonglan, and the other was Shirgan. Both of them were young, but they weren't weak. Their talents were considered outstanding among their peers, and they were very different from the others. Naturally, they were somewhat arrogant. However, their behavior was different. Tong Lan was very obvious. Even though she would shoot people into the wall at the slightest provocation, she was beautiful and cute. This was the most important point. No matter which world one was in, one could rely on one's looks to make a living. Tong Lan was small and short, so many people treated her as a little sister. This was especially so for the female students. Tong Lan had never laid her hands on the female students in the school. As a result, there were actually quite a number of people who liked Tong Lan. However, Shurgan was different. Other than daydreaming, he was daydreaming every day. Even though he didn't behave like Tong Lan, everyone could sense the arrogance in his bones. When Tong Lan encountered trouble, there were people who would help her, but no one cared about Shurgan. Today, after Shurgan realized that it would be very difficult for the two of them to fix that seemingly complicated thing in 7 days, he immediately said these words, which brought back a lot of people. After all, they were all aboriginals in their teens and didn't have too many complicated thoughts. Renbachyan just didn't know if he already had the idea to improve their relationship, or if he only had this idea after encountering this matter today. If it was the former, it would be fine if he already had the idea to get closer to others. However, if it was the latter, Renbachyan wasn't very happy about it. However, no matter what, it showed that Shurgan was more mature and smarter than his peers. Thinking about how his father was great elder Shurqing, it made people feel at ease. No matter what race it was, there would always be some eccentrics. The entire race was made up of crazy cats, and there were even cats whose personalities were similar to dogs. For the next few days, a group of people would surround and study the motorcycle every morning and afternoon. From time to time, they would hear, "This part should be straight. Bend it straight. You broke it. This thing is too brittle. It will break in one move. Quickly find a blacksmith to make a new one. Are you here to help or to cause trouble? Why did you pull this off? How do we put this thing back?" There was an endless stream of similar voices. During this period, Tong Lan would snort coldly. Whenever she did something wrong, she would raise her head to the sky and snort proudly. There was also Shurgan's encouraging voice, "Brothers and sisters, you are the best. Every small step we take forward is a great victory for us." Every time Renbachyan heard something like this, he would be puzzled. Where did Shurgan learn all these from? He hadn't heard anything like this from great elder Shurqing. It would be a waste of talent if he didn't become a young pioneer. Over the next few days, Renbachyan observed their daily repair progress. He was positive about their demolition ability, but also pessimistic about their repair ability. Shurgan and Tong Lan couldn't run away from the task of cleaning the toilet. This wasn't out of his expectations. If they could repair it, they wouldn't be students from Black Bamboo Academy. They would definitely be from Lanxiang. In a courtyard in Lan City, a few men gathered together and whispered to each other. "Lin Zhongli and the other 5 were all killed yesterday," the man in the middle said in a deep voice. Everyone's faces darkened when they heard this. More than 40 people split into 7 teams and sneaked in. Now, only a few of us are left, and we didn't even get close to that person. The man at the side was indignant. More than 40 Earthwill experts were handpicked from the army, but they didn't even get a chance to get close to that person. The city has been so strict for the past 2 months. We didn't even get a chance to make a move, and we already lost more than half of our men. I'm afraid that we won't be able to complete the mission even if all of us are sacrificed, another man said dispiritedly. After all, this isn't our territory. As long as we are slightly suspected, they won't even interrogate us before killing us. There are at least 100 people who have been killed recently. In my opinion, we might as well take a risk. Even if we fail, we will have tried our best and be worthy of the Emperor's grace." A man who looked somewhat effeminate gritted his teeth and said, "That person has 30 Earth-will experts by his side every day. We won't even have a chance to take a risk. It's better than the current situation. Who knows, we might not even have a chance to take a risk tomorrow or the day after tomorrow," the effeminate man said. "There's no need for tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. All of you can go and die now." A rough voice suddenly sounded from outside the courtyard. Following which, a loud sound came from the courtyard wall. The entire wall turned into countless stones that smashed toward them. Two of them barely managed to dodge a few stones before they were smashed into a bloody mess by the remaining stones. They couldn't even make out their human forms. The rest of them soared into the sky and fled in 3 different directions without saying a word. Several rays of sword gleam rose from the ground and streaked across the sky. Those few people were prepared when they fled and drew their weapons one after another. After a few sounds of swords colliding, it was as if there was a rain of blood in the sky. A slightly short and sturdy man walked into the courtyard and sneered, "We can't even get through today, so how can we talk about tomorrow or the day after tomorrow? The most important thing for a family is to be neat and united. Since all of you came to Deo together, I will send all of you down together." The other burly men who leaped into the courtyard were speechless. These words sounded rather imposing the first time they heard them, but they couldn't stand it when Sir Ren said it every day. Renbachien had already said it more than 10 times in the past 2 months. "Sir Tai, there are no survivors," someone quickly reported after checking the corpses. "Bring the corpses back to be used as fertilizer for the flowers. Recently, I got some good stuff from the Department of Agriculture and Livestock. I heard that they were made by Principal Ren. One is called a sweet potato, and the other is a pumpkin. I believe that they require human blood to grow well." Tai Yen made a gesture, turned around, and walked out. From what these fellows said just now, there was no one else. Maybe they were just fooling him. Even if they were telling the truth, there was no guarantee that no one else would sneak in. Chapter 318. A week had passed. Renbachien nodded his head in satisfaction as he looked at the tattered trailer, which was even more damaged than before. "Remember, 1 month. Renbachien pointed at Tonglan and Shirgan. "Everyone is a brick in Deo. Wherever it is needed, we will carry it. Regardless of your status, work hard. The pail and brush are all there. I hope the toilet will be clean the next day." Renbachien waved at everyone, turned around, and floated away. Everyone was dejected. However, this situation had been expected 2 days ago. Shirgan accepted it quickly, cupped his hands at everyone, and said, "Brothers and sisters, I have troubled all of you. Let's drink till we are drunk at Shanhui House. It's just that this little brother has one more thing to trouble everyone with." Shirgan was slightly embarrassed and said, "Everyone, please aim properly these days and don't spill outside." Everyone was speechless. Tong Lan's face was puffed up like a bun. She was angry. It made people want to pinch her. However, everyone knew that she was cursing in her heart and didn't want to provoke her. "Why don't we get 2 odd job workers to clean up since Yague isn't around?" someone suggested. Shirgan smiled bitterly and said, "He isn't that easy to fool. We don't know what will happen. Yague has a saying that is right. If you are wrong, you have to accept punishment. If you are beaten, you have to stand straight. Since things have come to this, you have to do what you have to do." Everyone naturally knew that Renbachien wasn't easy to fool. Seeing this, they didn't say anything else and left with a sigh. This was the first time the 49 students worked together to do something, but unfortunately, it ended in failure. The next day, Renbachien went to the men's toilet early in the morning. It was an old-fashioned school toilet. The school toilet left a deep impression on him when he was young. When it was built, people specially built a slope with cement. Every day, a large amount of water would be used to flush it down, and it would directly flow into the big hole outside the wall. However, the smell was still strong. After all, Dayo was too hot. The toilet was a little dirtier than when the odd job workers cleaned it every day, but it was indeed cleaned. Since this was the case, he didn't need to ask for too much. After all, getting Shirgan and Tonglan to clean the toilet was a very big matter in itself. After school at noon, when he was walking halfway, someone suddenly jumped out of nowhere and shouted, "Sir Ren, stop." The surrounding guards were startled at first, thinking that they had encountered an assassin. They even drew their swords halfway. He took it and saw that it was the Minister of Works, Tong Jinye. Lord Tong. When Rinpochen saw the ugly expression on Tong Jinye's face, he guessed that it was probably because of Tong Lan's toilet cleaning. "Sir Ren, isn't it too much to ask Lan, to clean the toilet?" Tong Jinye shouted. "A country has its laws, and a mansion has its rules. No matter who it is, I will treat everyone equally," Rinpochen said. "If you do this, Tong Lan will be ridiculed by others in the future. Even if Her Majesty is here today, I will not let this matter rest." Tong Jinye shouted. Rinpochen tilted his head and looked at him. He pressed a button on the walkie-talkie with one hand and said, "Sir Tong, not many people knew about this at first, but after you shouted, everyone will know." If he remembered correctly, this seemed to be Shi Qing's residence. How can such a thing be hidden from others? "Sir Ren, even though you and I get along well, for Lan's sake, I have to let you see my sandbag-sized fists." Tong Jinye raised his fists and said, "Sir Tong." Su Wei and the others immediately blocked in front of Rinpochen. "Get out of the way, or I will beat all of you up too," Tong Jinye said in a rough voice. "Sir Tong, this is our duty." Su Wei frowned. "In that case, there is no need to say more. Today, I will let all of you know why flowers are red." Tong Jinye snorted and appeared in front of Su Wei in an instant. He bent his legs slightly, and his body was half a meter above the ground. He was the same height as Su Wei and the others who were sitting on the fork-horned cow. Then, he threw a heavy punch at Su Wei. Su Wei met it with a punch as well. After a head-on collision, Su Wei was immediately sent flying. Tong Jinye pounced on Rinpochen from above. "Protect, sir," someone shouted and jumped from the fork-horned cow. However, he was slapped down by Tong Jinye. Rinpochen saw that Tong Jinye's speed was as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, he had sent Su Wei and another bodyguard flying. Rinpochen raised his hand and fired a shot at Tong Jinye. In any case, he knew that he couldn't hurt Tong Jinye and was only trying to slow him down. When Tong Jinye saw Rinpochen holding a small black object in his hand, his pupils shrank. In an instant, he turned his body in the air, causing Rinpochen to miss his shot. Then, he slapped the bodyguard below him down from the fork-horned cow. Using this force, he made a half-turn in the air and pounced on Rinpochen again. "Today, I will let you know what a sandbag-sized fish looks like." Tong Jinye laughed wildly in the air. A red silhouette suddenly appeared beside Tong Jinye. Before anyone could see the red silhouette's movements clearly, Tong Jinye flew like a cannonball and smashed into the wall of the residence next to him. He even caused half of the wall to collapse. After that blow, the red silhouette landed on the back of a fork-horned cow. She stood there with a calm look on her face. "Greetings, Your Majesty," everyone said in unison. "How big is a sandbag-sized fish?" the Empress asked coldly. Tong Jinye returned to the courtyard dejectedly. "Your Majesty, I want Lan to practice martial arts with him every day and teach him punches and kicks, but he made me clean the toilets." Sir Tong, a man should be clear about his actions. Even though Tong Lan accompanied me to practice martial arts, even if she didn't contribute much, she still has to be punished for her wrongdoings. This is the most basic principle. Furthermore, she isn't the only one cleaning the toilets. There's also Great Elder's son, Shirgan. Great Elder hasn't said anything yet, Ren Baqin said righteously. Tong Zhinya frowned and seemed to have thought of something. Then, he clapped his hands in realization and said, "No wonder Great Elder told me about this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known. He actually dug a hole for me. I'll find him now and make him pay. Your Majesty, I'll take my leave first." Ren Baqian's eyes were bright and full of expression. "Tong Zhinya, you old bastard, can you act any better? Don't be in such a hurry to leave. You still haven't told me how big a sandbag-sized fist is." "I'm very curious," the Empress said faintly. Tong Zhinya laughed dryly, cupped his hands, and said, "Your Majesty, I just saw a sandbag-sized fist. It's really powerful, and I'm very impressed. It's just that the fist was too fast, and I really couldn't see it clearly. In that case, I'll let you see it again." In a flash, the Empress appeared in front of Tong Zhinya and sent him flying with another punch. Another half of the wall surrounding the Great Elder's residence collapsed. Shi Qing sat in the courtyard and looked at Tong Zhinya, who was lying on the ground with blue eyes. He poured himself a cup of tea and drank it before saying slowly, "I won't settle the score with you for framing me just now, but you have to fix this wall, right?" Tong Zhinya spat. Chapter 319. Next week's midterm exam will test the content you've learned during this period of time. Those who pass can go on an outing with me for half a month. Those who fail can stay at home and do homework. The amount of homework will definitely be enough for you to finish until I come back. Go back and study hard. Ren Baqin propped his hands on the podium and said to everyone. Then, he strolled away without caring about everyone's reaction. After Ren Baqin left, the classroom exploded again. What is a test? What's an outing? Everyone was at a loss as they whispered to each other. They had never come into contact with such a thing before. However, there were two things that everyone knew. First, the so-called test was definitely related to what had been taught before. Secondly, if Yague was not satisfied, he would be in trouble. Although they didn't know what the qualification criteria were, everyone was prepared to go back home in the next few days and review everything they had learned previously. It had been almost 2 months since school started. According to the time, it should be time for the midterm exams. It was time for Ren Baqin to let them experience the kind of despair that he felt after taking an exam in school. No matter what, these students were much better than he was back then. At the very least, there were no men's singles, women's singles, or mixed doubles. However, he felt that he should go back and find an assistant. He couldn't possibly write every exam paper by himself, right? He had this idea before, but it was delayed because of the Jean family and his escape. At this time, he should find another assistant. However, Ren Baqin felt that if he were to hire an assistant, there was an 80% chance that the assistant would receive a double salary. Thinking about it, it did not matter anymore. The country already knew everything it needed to know, except that it did not know that this was an alternate world. As long as he didn't say anything, no one would notice. After all, alternate worlds and the Blessed Enclave were similar, but there were some differences in some aspects. Back then, he had hidden himself in order to divert the key point away from himself. The legend of the Blessed Enclave had existed since ancient times, and there was a specific location for it. As for the other world, the secret was on him. Other than that, there weren't many secrets that needed to be hidden. Apart from that, telling them most of it wouldn't make any difference. In any case, they couldn't come over. Moreover, he was the only one who dealt with them, so it was impossible for them to do anything to him in a short period of time. When Renbochin returned to Yangshin Palace Hall, he saw that the Empress's face was ice-cold, and her entire body was emitting an ice-cold killing intent. "Your Majesty, what happened?" Renbochin walked to the Empress's side and asked softly. The corners of the Empress's eyes twitched. Renbochin knew that this was because the Empress's killing intent had reached a certain level. Now, her mind was filled with thoughts of slashing people. After a while, the Empress coldly snorted and said, "Xia Baichong is simply too much. He actually wants me to hand over the murderer of the 7th prince and even dares to threaten me. If I don't hand over the murderer, I will invade the border with my army. Humph. I want to see what he can do to me." Renbochin was slightly shocked. What happened? The 7th prince is dead. He had a deep impression of that person who looked exactly like him. It could be said that he was the first person he wanted to kill after coming to this world. However, he knew that there was a huge gap between their statuses, so he suppressed this killing intent to the bottom of his heart. Who would have thought that he would actually die? It was simply too shocking. Someone actually dared to touch the 7th prince. How did he die? Where is it? Why would he look for you, Your Majesty? Renbochin was surprised. The 7th prince had been gone for half a year, right? Why would he suddenly look for the Empress? Renbochin naturally knew that if he didn't remember wrongly, the name of the Emperor of Great Xia was Xia Bailong. The Xia Baichong that the Empress mentioned just now should be him. No matter who it was, they wouldn't be happy when this matter came to them, let alone a proud and arrogant person like the Empress. The Emperor of Great Xia actually used a bucket of sh*t to slander the Empress. This was simply intolerable and he would definitely explode. I sent someone to kill him in Wulong Valley. The Empress glanced at him, then turned her head and said coldly. Pfft. Renbochin looked at the Empress with an embarrassed look. Did the other party find the culprit? You killed the other party's son, and in the end, the other party came knocking on your door. Yet, you still say that the other party is too much of a bully. The Empress raised her head and said unyieldingly, the person that I sent didn't leave any traces behind. It's impossible for him to know that I was the one who did it. He actually dared to slander me. Renbochin silently gave her a thumbs up in his heart. Then, he nodded his head in agreement and said, Indeed, he is too much of a bully. He actually dared to look for Your Majesty without any evidence. The Empress deeply agreed with him. Renbochin changed his tone and said, However, I feel that he is just looking for an excuse. I'm afraid that they are going to attack us in advance. The Empress pondered for a while and nodded her head. I'm afraid that's the case. Renbochin pondered for a long time and tried to analyze. Great Xia has long had the intention to attack us. Originally, there was still 1.5 years' time, but it was suddenly brought forward. Looking for Your Majesty is just a pretense to find an excuse to launch an attack. However, now that they aren't ready, there must be something that forced them to attack us. Is there any conflict in Great Xia that the Emperor wants to shift the conflict? Or is it? Renbochin put himself in the other party's shoes and thought about it. The second possibility wasn't small either. In fact, it could be both reasons that made Great Xia suddenly prepare to attack. Or, the 10,000 soldiers that died in Great Xia's territory previously scared him. He doesn't know how many ingredients are needed to concoct that poison and how long it will take. But, generally speaking, concocting a poison always requires a lot of ingredients and time. He is afraid that we will concoct more poison. He will think that if we had a lot of that poison, we would have already attacked them. I haven't been in Dayo for a long time, so no matter what, I won't have a lot of poison on hand. I have concocted so many poisons in such a short time in Dayo that tens of thousands of people lost their lives. If I have more time, I'm afraid that I will be able to concoct more poison, and they will be in big trouble. They might as well attack in advance and not give me time to concoct more poison. The Empress tilted her head and looked at him. This makes sense. What does your Majesty plan to do? Renbachien asked. No matter how the Empress answered, the other party was definitely going to attack them. Even if they didn't attack now, they would definitely attack in 1.5 years. It wasn't good or bad to make a move now. Just like what he said before, Dayo and Great Xia weren't ready. First, kill Gu Zicheng as a sacrifice to the heavens. Since Great Xia dares to invade us, let them all die, the Empress said coldly. Thinking about how she was wronged by Xia Baichong, she was filled with anger and couldn't appease her anger without killing. Poor Gu Zicheng. After defending for more than 10 years, he still couldn't escape death. Your Majesty, I have a book that I can give to Xia Baichong. It will definitely make him vomit blood. Renbachien rolled his eyes and came up with evil ideas. In any case, the war was going to start. It would be best if he could infuriate Xia Baichong to death. Oh. The Empress was slightly curious. What was Renbachien going to write? Bring me a brush and paper, the Empress instructed Hong Yuan. After a short while, a small table, paper, and brush were placed on the table. Renbachien sat down, ground the ink, moistened the brush, and then closed his eyes to rest. After a long time, when his energy, qi, and spirit were at their peak, he picked up the brush and started writing. The Empress looked at him with a look of disdain. Your words look like they were crawling out of chicken claws. Do you even need to prepare? Even though his words looked like they were crawling out of chicken claws, the content immediately turned the Empress's gloomy mood into a sunny one. The Empress of Dayo to Xia Baichong, my old friend was as arrogant as you, but now the grass on his grave is 5 meters tall. Looking at the grass on his grave, I think of my old friend who was as arrogant as you. My old friend is like you, but the grass on his grave is as high as my eyebrows. Renbachien's brush was like the wind, and his strokes were like dragons and snakes. He finished writing in one breath. Renbachien looked at it from top to bottom and was very satisfied. Then, he asked curiously, Your Majesty, why did you kill the 7th prince? The Empress looked at him with a smile on her face and said, He was too ugly, I hate him. Renbachien was speechless. Chapter 320. That afternoon, the Empress gathered everyone in the imperial court to discuss this matter. Everyone's reaction was even more intense and unyielding than the Empress's. On the spot, there were people who wanted to kill Gu Zicheng as a sacrifice to the heavens before sending troops to Great Xia. As for how the 7th prince of Great Xia died and who killed him, no one cared. There was only one thought in everyone's mind. I haven't even caused trouble for you, yet you dare to cause trouble for me. If you want to fight, let's fight. Do you think I'm afraid of you? They might as well fight their way to Great Xia and plunder. Shiqing and Kuzhai, who were more mature and prudent, only stroked their beards in silence. Great Elder, do you have anything to say? The Empress looked at the reactions of the people below her, and it wasn't beyond her expectations. To the Aboriginals, such a reaction was expected. Whoever had the bigger fist was the boss. Between the two countries, only the weak would defend themselves. I feel that we should warn the Protectorate of the North, the Protectorate of the Northeast, and the Protectorate of the Southeast, especially the Protectorates of the Northeast and the Southeast. I'm afraid that the Yun Nation and the Qin Nation will also make strange moves, so we should be on guard at all times. There was also the problem of salt. After the war, the number of salt merchants from the Yun and Qin kingdoms would be greatly reduced. Salt would probably be a big problem. Our days on the mountain will be even more difficult, Shiqing said in a deep voice. The Empress nodded her head slightly. Salt was indeed a big problem. After the war, the trade routes would definitely be affected. At that time, the amount of salt transported into Deo would be greatly reduced. Now, it all depended on Renbachian's trip to the mountains. Your Majesty, instead of being on guard, why don't we strike first and gain the upper hand? We can directly invade the Yun nation and occupy the salt fields. Then, the salt problem will naturally be solved. Even if we can't, we can still plunder them. The cities of the Yun nation can't possibly lack salt, right? Someone immediately followed up. Qin Chuan stepped forward and said. The Empress didn't say a word after hearing this. It wasn't a problem for 15,000 soldiers to block the Yun nation, but it was impossible for them to penetrate the Yun nation. However, seizing the cities of the Yun nation and plundering the ironware and salt was very likely to succeed. Of course, the price was equally high. At that time, they would definitely be pincered by the Yun nation and Great Xia. Even with Deo's strength, fighting on two fronts at the same time was a little strenuous. Defending and attacking were two completely different things. How's the recruitment of new soldiers going? The Empress asked. Your Majesty, the recruitment has been completed. A total of 20,000 people have just entered the camp. The recruit training had just begun, and it would take at least half a year. However, I'm afraid that we don't have enough weapons and equipment. The armory is filled with rats. The last few supplies were sent to the Protectorate of the North 2 months ago. The Empress nodded and said, use the wooden saber to train first. After that, he asked Feng Ho about the forging of military equipment. Speaking of this, Feng Ho's face was filled with joy. Currently, Mount Damo produced close to 5,000 kilograms of iron every day. In less than 3 months, they had already produced a total of 600,000 kilograms of iron, which could be used to forge 30,000 weapons. Nowadays, the iron ingots that were sent to Jingtian furnace every half a month were piled up like a mountain. However, at this time, the forging of weapons depended on repeated hammering to remove the impurities, and then adding beast blood to change the composition of the long saber so that it had a certain alloy characteristic. Even a good master could only forge 3 standard long sabers a day. Jingtian furnace had a total of more than 20 skilled craftsmen. Adding in some ordinary craftsmen, they could only produce no more than 100 weapons a day. Right now, there were about 3,000 standard longswords piled up in the Jingtian furnace. This number had already made Feng Ho overjoyed. After he said this, everyone was surprised. They didn't expect that so many weapons could be forged in just 2 months. Following that, everyone was also delighted. At this rate, they would be able to equip an army of 10,000 in 2 months. One had to know that the Aboriginals only had a total of 90,000 soldiers. With the combat power of the Aboriginals, 10,000 fierce warriors could be used as an army of 100,000 soldiers from the other 3 nations. The Empress nodded and asked, can it be faster? Feng Ho thought for a while and said, at most, 150 longswords can be forged every day. This way, they could forge 4,500 longswords every month. Everyone in the imperial court was satisfied. However, the Empress still felt that it wasn't enough. Even though she didn't respond to Qin Chuan's words just now, she was really moved. Deo lacked too many things. Especially after Renbachian went to Earth for so long, he increasingly felt that Deo was lacking in various resources. In particular, to develop to the level of Earth, not only did they need knowledge, they also needed various resources. Not only did they need salt, but they also needed iron, copper, and various other metals. And a lot of manpower and material resources. She wanted to build a new city, but what could she do without money and manpower? She wanted to build roads, but what could she do without money and manpower? The palace's treasury was empty, and Renbachian's training could still last for more than a month. What could she do without money? Renbachian had thought of the same problem before, but he wanted to do it through commercial means. The Empress's idea was more direct. Rob no one. The soldiers of the Yun nation and Great Xia, as well as those commoners, were all humans. When they were chatting, Renbochin mentioned that it would be best to use these people as coolies to build roads. Even though the Empress didn't say anything at that time, she took note of this matter. No money. They would have money after conquering the Yun nation. After conquering the Yun nation, they wouldn't just rob and run like before. Instead, they would occupy the entire Yun nation. As for how to manage it after conquering it, that would be a matter for the future. Wasn't there still Renbochin? Let him think of a way. There were more than 50 ethnic groups in their country, and he knew what to do. However, if they wanted to conquer the Yun nation, the current army was definitely not enough. Another 20,000 wouldn't be enough either. The Empress was slightly distracted on the throne. Tong Zhenye took 2 steps forward and said, "Your Majesty, regarding the matter of weapons, Principal Ren might have a way. He once said that there's something that can turn iron into steel and can be made into weapons without repeated forging." Tong Zhenye's words pulled the Empress back to reality. "I understand. I will ask him in a while," the Empress said. She was silent for a while, and a thoughtful expression appeared on her face. Seeing the Empress's expression, everyone kept quiet and waited for her to speak. "How many soldiers do you think we need to conquer the Yun nation and incorporate it into Dao?" the Empress asked. The atmosphere in the hall froze all of a sudden. Everyone didn't expect the Empress to actually say such words at this time. Furthermore, she even said it with a serious face. "Your Majesty, are you serious?" "Your Majesty, we need an additional 60,000 soldiers on top of the 20,000 new recruits," Qin Chuan immediately said in a loud and clear voice. From his reaction speed, it was obvious that he had this idea for a long time. Otherwise, he might have to bend his fingers for a while. This subject has already thought about it. The Yun nation has a total of 400,000 soldiers. If we go to war, they will continue to recruit more soldiers. With the strength of the Yun nation, they should be able to reach 700,000 soldiers or even more. It would take at least 60,000 soldiers to conquer the Eastern Sea. After we attack the Yun nation, Great Xia and the Qin nation won't just sit back and watch. Furthermore, if we lengthen the line of soldiers, we will be vulnerable to attacks from all sides. We will need at least another 20,000 soldiers. Pulling the battlefront into the Yun nation's territory would involve many aspects. "Get ready to recruit another 20,000 soldiers," the Empress said. "Yes." Qin Chuan's face lit up with excitement. "Your Majesty. If we recruit another 20,000 soldiers, I'm afraid we won't be able to supply them with food and pay. The 20,000 soldiers we have now is already the most we can do." Minister of Revenue Tu Wan immediately stepped forward. The Empress propped her chin up with her index finger and said, "The army's provisions are in the Yun nation, waiting for Dao's warriors to collect them. As for food..." That afternoon, the palace discussion lasted until evening. When the Empress was having her meal, she told Renbochin about some of the things that were discussed. Renbochin was immediately dumbfounded. What was going on? Previously, they were still preparing to deal with Great Xiao's attack. Why were they attacking the Yun nation now? Moreover, there were so many people in the imperial court discussing it in full swing for an entire afternoon. And he basically passed. How willful are you people? How strange were their brain circuits? After a long while, Renbochin didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he asked, "Your Majesty, are you serious?" The Empress wiped her mouth, raised her head, and rolled her eyes at him. "Dao lacks iron. Even though Mount Damo's daily output of iron is close to 5,000 kilograms, according to what you said, we still lack iron. Especially in order to develop to the level of your world, the amount of resources required would not be enough even if you emptied Mount Damo. Dayo lacked iron, but the Yun nation had a lot of iron mines. Dayo lacked money, and so did the Yun nation. Dayo lacked craftsmen, and so did the Yun nation. Dayo lacked labor, and the Yun nation was full of them. The Yun nation has everything we want, so why don't we conquer it? As for military strength, there were countless fierce warriors in the 60,000 mountains. What they lacked was something else. Therefore, what they had to consider now was the lack of weapons and food. After that, you will be responsible for thinking about how to make the people of the Yun nation behave. Do you have any more questions? Renbachien, Your Majesty, you have evolved from buying and selling to robbing and snatching. In the past, he always felt that war was far away from him, even though he knew that Great Xia might not attack anytime soon. However, the development of the situation today caught him unprepared and also made him realize that war was far from as far away as he thought it was. Also, Dayo really didn't lack labor as much as Your Majesty thought. There were still more than 10 million remnant citizens of the Han nation living in retirement in the south. Your Majesty, why not the Qin nation? The Qin nation is located in the south of the Yun nation. It is located in a corner and is only adjacent to the Yun nation. It seems more suitable than the Yun nation, which is adjacent to Great Xia and the Qin nation, Renbachien said curiously. The Qin nation doesn't have as many resources as the Yun nation. Furthermore, there are too many waterways in the Qin nation. There are rivers everywhere, and as long as they break the bridges in many places, we will be delayed for a long time. Even if we occupy the Qin nation, it will be more troublesome. On the contrary, the Yun nation is a flat land. Renbachien finally understood. He then gave the Empress a thumbs up and praised her. Your Majesty is indeed thoughtful. While others are still thinking about Great Xia, Your Majesty has already thought about poetry and the distance. You have also made plans for the future, allowing Dayo to advance faster and faster, and laying a solid foundation for the rapid entry into the technological era. Your foresight is truly extraordinary, the Empress nodded in agreement. Chapter 321. Iron was relatively easy for Renbachien to solve. He only needed to build a blast furnace and use water power to forge iron. Even if he used manpower to pull a heavy hammer with ropes, it would be more efficient than repeatedly hammering it. As long as there was enough steel, he could also equip every soldier with a breastplate. Aboriginal warriors had strong vitality, and a breastplate could reduce casualties. Furthermore, it wouldn't affect their movements. However, Renbachien was a little puzzled about the issue of food. Pumpkins, potatoes, and sweet potatoes had just been popularized, and it would take at least half a year for a considerable harvest. At that time, these crops could be targeted at the commoners, reduce the consumption of meat, and replenish the army. There was a problem that he hadn't realized before. For Aboriginal warriors, especially on the battlefield, they had to eat a lot of meat in order to maintain sufficient physical strength. This was because the strength of warriors came from food, and the meat of animals in this world contained the most substances that could be converted into calories. No matter how much pumpkins and potatoes there were, they couldn't be used as staple food, let alone as staple food for the army. If they only ate sweet potatoes, and pumpkins, they wouldn't be able to do anything else for the day. After breakfast, they would have lunch. After breakfast, they would have lunch. After lunch, they would have dinner. After dinner, they would have supper. In this case, there was only one way to replenish the army's rations, and that was to fish. The Aboriginals didn't eat much fish. On one hand, they were used to hunting and raising livestock and didn't have the habit of fishing. On the other hand, fish had thorns and were more troublesome to eat. Furthermore, fish weren't like livestock that could be sent somewhere alive. With Dayo's weather, they would start to stink after a day. Therefore, unless it was along the river and there was a lack of other food, fish wasn't usually on the menu of Dayo. Renbachien had an idea. The two reasons why the Aboriginals didn't like fish could be solved with one method: canned fish, similar to canned sardines. After being processed at high temperatures, even the thorns could be chewed and eaten. This was a feasible method. There were two choices. One was glass canned food, which was easy to achieve since the glass factory was readily available. After filling a glass bottle, it would be heated at high temperatures, stuffed with a wooden cork, and sealed with wax. Although the shelf life wasn't as long as vacuum canned food, it was enough. The drawback was that it was more troublesome to transport. The glass bottle was too heavy, and the canned food had to be packed with layers of grass. Otherwise, with Dayo's roads, it would only be glass shards. The other one was tin cans. However, Rinpoche did not know if there were any tin mines in Dayo. What's more, making a tin can didn't just require iron and tin. It also required many other techniques. When the Empress saw that he was frowning, she asked him about it. He then told her about his idea of making canned fish. After hearing this, the Empress wrinkled her nose slightly and seemed to be somewhat happy. This is a good idea. Glass cans will do. You can make them bigger. I always felt that the cans on your earth are too small. They can't even be eaten in one bite. Rinpoche clapped his hands and said, "Yes, we can make them into glass barrels or terrariums. Make them thicker, and it will be easier to manufacture and transport them. Your Majesty is indeed talented, to be able to think of such a good solution in such a short time. I didn't expect it." The Empress snorted happily and tilted her head up slightly. Rinpoche felt that the Empress was becoming more and more adorable. His heart was always tempted to kiss her. However, he still had to return to Earth at night. In order to prevent himself from returning in a seriously injured state, he gave up on this tempting idea. "My intuition tells me that you seem to be up to no good just now." The Empress gave him a sidelong glance. "Your Majesty. I'm innocent." That night, Rinpoche returned to Earth. He recruited an assistant and found someone to prepare the exam papers. At the same time, he searched for ancient forging press drawings on the internet. Based on the learning progress of these Aboriginal students, their literacy level was roughly at the level of a 4th grade primary school student. Mathematics was also at the level of a 2nd grade primary school student. Physics and chemistry were outstanding subjects, and their progress was different. It was impossible for them to simply pass the exam papers in school. They had to find someone to specially come up with a set of exam questions. When the news of Rinpoche's search for an assistant was discovered by the nation, there was another round of intensive analysis. After analyzing the gender, age, appearance, height, personality, and other aspects, Rinpoche had an assistant by his side a few days later. Looking at the Adam's apple and the gender on the information, it should be a woman. The way she spoke and walked was a little like a man. Her appearance was more masculine, and she was also flat-chested. This was the most suitable result after many people analyzed the situation. When Rinpoche saw this candidate, he didn't know what to say. Even though the previous candidates were either not very pretty or 7 feet tall, he had no choice but to reluctantly give up even though he approved in his heart. However, this person really exceeded his requirements, right? Furthermore, there was a man's name, Shenfeng. Putting the gender of this person aside, the other aspects were very much in line with Rinpoche's requirements. In the future, Rinpoche could hire this person for anything. After some thought, he hired this person to bring along the exam papers and the street lighting equipment. These 2 days, he hesitated on whether to bring the street lighting equipment or salt. Bringing 600 kilograms of salt at a time was completely inadequate for Dayo. To ensure that more than 30 million people consumed salt, they would need about 2 million kilograms of salt a month. This was under the current situation where the salt intake of the people in Dayo was only half that of the people on Earth. To achieve the normal salt intake, they would need at least 4 million kilograms of salt. Renbochin would return to Earth after 5 days of classes every month. At most, he would only need 2,600 kilograms of salt, which wasn't very meaningful. It was better to set up the street lamps in the palace first. He would go to the Black Pool in a few days to take a look at the salt. If it didn't work there, he could only go to the Yun nation to snatch it. After the first day of discussion, the Imperial Court of Dao discussed for a few more days. The matter of attacking the Yun nation was almost decided. As for Great Xia, no one considered it. In any case, they would deal with it as it came. Contrary to everyone's expectations, Gu Zicheng wasn't sacrificed to the heavens. Instead, he was sent to prison. Everyone in the embassy was sent to prison. Only one person was sent back to Great Xia with a letter of credence. However, everyone was clear that the day Great Xia attacked was the day Gu Zicheng would be sacrificed to the heavens. It was time for this legend, who had lived for so many years, to come to an end. On the 4th day of the discussion, news came from Ping City. 3 days ago, Dao had increased its troops by 200,000 at Yesua Pass, Qingyang Pass, and Yunluo City. On the same day that the Empress received the questioning from the Emperor of Great Xia, the reinforcements from Great Xia arrived at night. These few days, the Protectorate of the North discovered that there was more smoke in these 3 cities than usual. They used the drones that Renbochin left behind to detect it from the sky. The reinforcements from Great Xia were faster than expected. This also showed that, like what Renbochin said, the Emperor of Great Xia was just looking for a reason to attack. He simply didn't care about the Empress's explanation. The war was already inevitable. Chapter 322. Look at your own papers. You are not allowed to look around or look at other people's answers. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Renbochin sat at the front of the classroom and scanned everyone with his hawk-like eyes. The Type 81 rifle was placed on his knees, and the threat was obvious. Everyone looked at the papers that had just been handed out. They finally knew what an exam was. Everyone frowned and looked around. When Renbochin's words were passed down, everyone immediately lowered their heads and looked at their own papers. After a while, everyone picked up their pens and started to answer. These days, everyone had gotten used to the brush made from the feathers of a big bird. They dipped the brush in ink and started to write. After getting used to it, it was much faster than using a brush. Bang! The sudden gunshot startled everyone. Du Lao Lu, I'm warning you. If you look to the side again, you will have to recuperate at home, Renbochin said faintly. Du Lao Lu was shocked. He muttered in his heart and looked at his own papers obediently. The others didn't dare to do anything. After all, guns were a big deterrent to them. Even though they wouldn't die, it was still very painful. After an hour, the alarm clock that Renbochin placed at the side suddenly rang, giving everyone another shock. This was also the first time they saw an alarm clock. Time's up. Hand me all the papers, Renbochin patted the desk beside him and said to everyone. After everyone handed in their papers, he took the papers and left. After he left, everyone started to ask each other, what's the speed at which sound travels? What's the melting point of iron? Does a convex or concave lens emit light? Renbochin first sent the papers back to Pingle Park. Along the way, there were already many thick wooden pillars erected on both sides of the road. They were about 6 meters tall, and every pillar was about the same thickness. After the bark was peeled off, a layer of plant sap was applied to the pillars, which had a certain antiseptic effect. In addition, the wood itself wasn't easily eaten by insects, so it should be able to be used for a few years. These pillars had just been installed, and the street lamps hadn't been installed yet. The batteries and street lamps that were brought here weren't enough to install all these. When Renbochin arrived at Yangxin Palace Hall, he saw a few boxes on the ground. A few craftsmen were already waiting at the side. Renbochin first taught these craftsmen how to connect the solar panels to the batteries and light bulbs. Even though they didn't know what they were used for, they did a good job under Renbochin's instructions. First, one of them leaped to a height of more than 2 meters. Then, they climbed to the top like apes, clamped their legs on the wooden pillar, and used a rope to hang the solar panel, battery bulb, and lampshade from the basket up. Then, they began to install it. After they were done with their act, Renbochin climbed up to take a look. Surprisingly, their act was pretty good. At first, he was a little slow, but after a few sets, he became more and more proficient. Renbochin felt that the learning ability of these craftsmen was much better than that of the idiots in the academy. 20 sets of street lamps were installed in one afternoon. 6 of them were installed in front of the Yangshin Palace Hall, and the rest were installed on the road leading from the Yangshin Palace Hall to the Pingle Park. Renbochin hoped that this section would at least light up first. After he was done with all these, he entered Yangshin Palace Hall to accompany the Empress and wait for nightfall. "Are you going to the mountains in a few days?" the Empress asked. "Yeah. Salt is a big issue. I will solve it this morning. If I can't solve it, I will think of other ways as soon as possible," Renbochin replied. He wasn't sure if they could produce well salt, but he had to give it a try. "Oh." The Empress nodded her head and didn't say anything else. However, from tonight onwards, the outside of Yangshin Palace Hall will always be lit up. When your Majesty goes out to look at the stars, you won't need to carry a lantern anymore, Renbochin said with a smile. Speaking of street lamps, the Empress was a lot happier. Even though there were still various differences between Deo and Earth, she still had to take things step by step. Looking at the gradual changes in the palace and the students learning the things that Renbochin taught, she felt that she would be able to see Deo become as prosperous and beautiful as Earth in her lifetime. "Great Xia sent out their troops today," the Empress said casually. "So fast." Renbochin was a little surprised. It had only been a week since the last time the Emperor of Great Xia questioned them. Great Xia couldn't wait any longer. Since they have already decided to fight and are ready, they naturally won't delay. The Empress wasn't surprised. In the afternoon, 150,000 soldiers from Tiesuo Pass were arrayed in front of Ping City. There were also catapults and other military equipment. However, General Hongwu said that their target might be Shun City and Ziyue City. He has already ordered them to strengthen their defenses and be careful of night attacks. "As for the specifics, we will know tomorrow," the Empress said faintly. These few days, Renbochin had been looking at the maps of Deo and Great Xia. The cities and checkpoints adjacent to Deo were mainly these: Tiesuo Pass and Ping City, Qingyang Pass and Shun City, Yunluo City and Ziyue City. Of course, there were also large plains, mountain ranges, and valleys that connected the two countries. However, these were the main places. If they didn't destroy these 3 places and came from other places, it would be very easy to be blocked. Furthermore, the logistics would also be difficult to sustain. Therefore, if their target was the whole of Deo, they had to destroy one of the cities to ensure a smooth route. General Hongwu should be able to stop them, Renbochin said. Renbochin didn't know much about Hongwu, but he had been stationed at the border for decades and had an extremely high reputation. His knowledge of military strategy wasn't comparable to that of ordinary people. He still had 30,000 Aboriginal warriors in his hands, as well as drones, binoculars, and walkie-talkies provided by Renbochin. Presumably, it shouldn't be a problem to stop the Great Xia army for a short period of time. The Empress nodded and said, "That's natural." Her tone was full of trust for Hongwu. After the two of them had dinner, Renbochin heard a small commotion outside. He turned his head and saw that the sky was already dark. However, it was different from the darkness of the past. there was still a certain amount of light, and he knew that the street lamps were sufficient. "Your Majesty, let's go out and take a look. The starry sky tonight must be exceptionally beautiful." Renbochin extended his hand and invited the Empress. "All right," the Empress replied with a smile. Renbochin took the opportunity to hold the Empress's hand and walked out. At this moment, both of them could see the light coming from outside. When they left Yangshin Palace Hall, they saw that the guards outside were looking up in a daze. They were practically unable to close their mouths. Previously, when these pillars were installed, no one expected them to have such an effect. After the sky turned dark, they actually lit up automatically. Furthermore, the lanterns that were commonly used in the palace couldn't be compared to them. At this moment, there were 12 wooden pillars erected in the courtyard outside Yangshin Palace Hall. 6 of the wooden pillars were emitting a white light that illuminated the surrounding scenery. Although it wasn't as bright as daytime, the courtyard was still rather clear. Cough. Renbochin coughed, and the 4 guards outside finally reacted. They turned around and greeted, "Greetings, Your Majesty." The Empress nodded slightly and didn't say anything. She allowed Renbochin to lead her under the street lamps. Renbochin led the Empress out of the courtyard of Yangshin Palace Hall. There were still 2 rows of street lamps outside, but only 1 row was lit. The 2 of them walked on this path. 2 figures, one in black and one in red, slowly moved forward. Renbochin was in a good mood. Dayo also had street lamps. Although they were now brought over from Earth, they would be made by Dayo sooner or later. "The starry sky tonight is exceptionally bright," Renbochin said with a smile. The Empress turned her head to look behind her, then looked in front of her and said, "It's only this distance." The distance between the 2 street lamps was 60 feet, which was about 20 meters. The 14 street lamps brightly lit up the entire road from Yangshin Palace Hall to Pingle Park. Many people in the Imperial Palace stared blankly at the road which had suddenly been lit up from afar. However, the other places were still in complete darkness. Very soon, it will cover the entire palace. Then, one day, it will cover the entire Dayo, Renbochin said with a smile. Chapter 323. Farming, 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 I have to say it 3 times. This book was originally a farming novel. It was originally more of a daily life. It wasn't about leveling up quickly and slapping faces. It wasn't about leveling up quickly and slapping faces. It wasn't about leveling up quickly and slapping faces. Old readers know that my style has always been biased towards daily life. Chapter 324. It was nighttime. ZUS City was 150 kilometers away from Ping City, and it was located on both sides of Ping City. The population was only tens of thousands of people, and the city walls were 5 meters tall. It wasn't considered a tall city, and it was considered short compared to ordinary border cities. However, over the past few decades, this city had been firmly guarding this line. At this moment, everyone in ZUS City was wearing helmets and armor, but it wasn't considered solemn. Instead, it was very noisy, and laughter could be heard from time to time. Every 2 meters on the city wall, there was a burly man wearing shabby leather armor and wielding a long saber standing there, looking into the darkness in the distance. Although they knew that the Great Xia army was in front, the darkness affected their vision, and they couldn't see far even with the help of the lights on the city wall. However, even though they knew that the Great Xia army was on their way, they didn't look nervous. Instead, they looked relaxed. "I heard that the Great Xia army has also arrived at Ping City and Shun City. Are they all out? They don't even want their lair anymore. Hee, whoever kills 100 people will be promoted by 1 rank. Whether they can get promoted or not depends on this trip. Who knows, they might be able to fight their way to Great Xia this time." Everyone laughed heartily. Deputy Protector General, the Great Xia army has stopped 3 kilometers away from the north. We haven't found out their number yet. The Great Xia army has come from afar. Is there anyone willing to welcome them? Let them feel the enthusiasm of our fierce Aboriginal warriors. The Deputy Protector General of the North, Xiongyu, sat on the seat at the front of the hall. Below him were 2 rows of more than 10 generals wearing leather armor. Your subordinates are willing to go. Almost everyone below stood up. Oh, your spirit is not bad. Xiongyu nodded. Bai Shiye, Zhongqing, both of you will lead 1,000 men out from the north gate. After killing for a while, you will leave and return through the east and west gates. You will set off in 15 minutes and return in an hour. Xiongyu gave his orders, and the 2 of them left with smiles on their faces. Continue to send scouts out of the city and see how many men they have, Xiongyu added. 15 minutes later, the north gate of Zeus City opened, and 2,000 burly men wearing leather armor whizzed out. After separating for a distance, they brandished their long sabers and sprinted. Although he was running, his speed was not much slower than that of a galloping horse. With the remaining strength, his running speed was almost the same as Usain Bolt, and he did not slow down even after running for a few miles. When they could already see the dense mass of troops under the moonlight, the 2 generals each shouted, "Kill!" The people behind him immediately let out beast-like roars and pounced towards the dense army in front of them. Everyone, listen up. Kill! Following a clear voice, thousands of figures rushed out from the front of the army. What greeted them was a wave of crossbows, followed by a variety of weapons. Sabers, spears, swords, halberds, all sorts of weapons could be seen. Steel whips and iron pens could also be seen. Kill! Bai Shiye's eyes were filled with excitement as he slashed his long sword at the oncoming shadow. The other party seemed to be startled by the momentum of his long sword. Then, his body floated to the side like a leaf blown by the wind. Then, the long sword in his hand trembled, and specks of silver stars appeared. Die! Bai Shiye turned his body, and his blade force turned into a streak of white light that swept across his opponent's waist, instantly splitting it into 2. The long sword in his opponent's hand only left a trace of blood on his arm, as if he had been bitten by a mosquito. However, this opponent made him feel that something wasn't right. Someone in the Great Xia army who could use a weapon like a sword definitely shouldn't be this weak. You dare to kill my disciple? You're courting death. A loud roar came from not far away, and an old man holding a sword flew over everyone's heads and headed straight for Bai Shiye. Both parties' swords clashed, and both parties could feel the force from the other party's weapon. Bai Shiye took 2 steps back, while the other party flew back 5 to 6 meters. It's an earth will expert from Great Xia. Bai Shiye immediately knew the strength of the other party, which was roughly equivalent to an intermediate earth will expert. However, the martial arts technique that the other party used just now made him somewhat suspicious. It wasn't a move that was commonly used on the battlefield. More than half of the 18 consecutive sword strikes were feints. To use such tricks on the battlefield, the other party definitely wasn't someone from the army. He looked to his left and right and saw that the opponents that his subordinates encountered were similar to the ones that he had encountered. They aren't the Great Xia army, but those sects within the borders of Great Xia. Bai Shiye suddenly reacted. But why would they appear here? Just now, after that opponent was sent flying by a slash, he didn't know where to hide. Bai Shiye killed a few more opponents. At this moment, the sound of orderly footsteps could be heard in front of everyone. Every step was like a giant stepping on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. Countless black shadows could be seen moving in the darkness, and the tip of the spear reflected the cold moonlight. Following which, a bugle horn sounded, and the people who were fighting with the Aboriginals immediately fled to the sides like rabbits. Their speed was so fast that the Aboriginals couldn't catch up with them. Shoot! Hum. Countless arrows were shot from the darkness at everyone like raindrops. In an instant, 60 to 70 people were shot and turned into porcupines. In addition, many people had 1 or 2 arrow wounds on their bodies. When Baishurya saw this situation, he immediately let out a long howl, and everyone retreated at lightning speed. However, just as everyone was retreating, another wave of arrows rained down. Even though the casualties this time were smaller, 30 to 40 people couldn't dodge in time and were turned into porcupines. The people beside them immediately grabbed their clothes and ran away. When they realized that they weren't breathing, they chopped off their heads and hung them on their waists, leaving their corpses in place. Their idea was to bring the heads of the fallen soldiers back to the 60,000 mountains for burial. As for the corpses, they didn't care. On the way back to the city with everyone, Baishurya did a rough count. At least 300 people didn't make it back, and less than 100 heads were brought back. This made his heart ache so much that it almost bled. Of course, when they retreated, he didn't even consider the 500 to 600 corpses on the ground. "Sir," Baishurya called out after returning. "Your subordinate is back to report on the mission." "How was it?" Xiong Yu asked. "We attacked 1,000 people and lost about 300 of our own," Baishurya reported. Xiong Yu and the others were a little surprised after hearing this. They originally guessed that the number of casualties would be around 100 to 200 people at most. After all, the other party had just arrived. How could they cause so many casualties after such a long and arduous journey? "Sir, what I encountered wasn't the Great Xia army. At that time, the people I encountered weren't using the martial arts techniques of the military battlefield. They were more like the moves of the martial arts sects of Great Xia. Furthermore, I saw many people who weren't very strong, but they ran extremely fast. It seemed like they were using the so-called body techniques that those people used," Baishurya replied. At this moment, Zhongqing also came in from outside and cupped his fists. "Sir, your subordinate is back to report on the mission." "How was it?" Xiong Yu asked in a deep voice. 1,000 people attacked, 600 returned, and 400 died in battle. Zhongqing had an ugly look on his face. Following which, Zhongqing recounted the events that he encountered were exactly the same as Baishurya's. They were both entangled by the martial arts sects of Great Xia. Although the techniques of the other party weren't suitable for close combat, their strength was much higher than that of the Great Xia army. Furthermore, there were 2 to 3 people against 1 person. Even if they couldn't kill them, they could at least entangle them for a while. Furthermore, there were many earth-will-level existences among them. Following which, the entire Great Xia army attacked with longbows and arrows. This caused the losses of the 2 teams that attacked to be much higher than expected. This change surprised everyone in the whole. Did Great Xia actually pull the sects of the martial arts sects onto the battlefield? At this moment, outside of Shun City, after the Great Xia army dispatched their mounted scouts, the battle formation split into 2 sides. 20 horses dragged round objects that were in the shape of pokes and pushed them to the front of the battle formation. They were arranged in a straight line, and each and every black cylinder cast from fine iron was aimed at Ziyue City, which was a few kilometers away. Chapter 325. Boom! 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 Following a series of deafening booms, more than 10 huge stone bullets smashed into the walls of Ziyue City. However, more than half of them flew into the city and caused some accidental casualties. A small portion of them smashed into the city wall, creating a large pit. Is this their catapult? It's not as far as the previous ones, but the sound is a little louder. Xiong Yu stood on the city wall and scratched his bald head. Why wasn't Great Xia as good as before? At this point in time, those iron tubes were already 700 to 800 meters away from Zhua City, which was the limit of their firing range. When the previous round of booms sounded, Xiongyu brought everyone up to the top of the city wall to take a look. After taking a look around, he was somewhat puzzled. This new catapult wasn't as powerful as the previous ones in Great Xia, and he didn't know what use they had for it. After a full 30 minutes, just as Xiongyu was considering whether to go back and take a nap, the other party's iron tubes once again exploded with a loud boom. Every iron tube shot out a stone bullet that had a diameter of 6 inches and was polished into a round shape. Xiongyu suddenly leaped up, extended his arm, and spun 2 rounds in the air. By the time he landed, there was already a round stone bullet in his hand. After tossing it in his hand twice, Xiongyu smacked his lips and said, "I thought they came up with some new tricks. It's not interesting at all." With a flick of his hand, he threw the stone bullet back. It hit one of the iron tubes. Immediately, gravel flew everywhere, and a few screams could be heard. That iron tube was also smashed to the ground. "I'm going back to take a nap. I'm getting old, and my stamina can't be compared to the younger generation. If there's anything, report to me immediately." Xiongyu had a bored look on his face. What was Great Xia up to this time? However, no matter what, with the 8,000 warriors in the city and the tens of thousands of aboriginal commoners who could single-handedly defeat the Great Xia soldiers, Xiongyu wasn't worried at all. "Yes, sir," everyone replied. At this moment, a sudden shout came from the sky. "Xiongyu, where are you going?" Following which, chains extended from the city wall under Xionyu's feet and wrapped around his ankles. Following which, a huge spear shot towards Xiongyu with a sharp piercing sound. At the same time, 3 other figures dashed towards Xiongyu in the darkness like lightning. "Ha, 5 spirit will experts. Die for this old man." Xiongyu laughed out loud and waved a pair of iron fists towards the spear that seemed to be able to pierce through the city. 300 li away. Hongwu was reading a book in the mansion. Suddenly, his eyes flashed. In the blink of an eye, he appeared beside the wall. The longbow that was hanging on the wall appeared in his hand. He drew his bow and knocked an arrow, his whole body bursting with vigor. Many people in Ping City were shocked. They turned their heads to look into the city. They could all feel a huge beast opening its eyes in the residence in the middle of the city, baring its fangs at the sky. A bow and arrow soared into the sky from the mansion with an aura that seemed capable of piercing through the heavens. "Your Majesty, urgent report." Xianzhe rushed in from outside the hall and knelt on one knee. "Bring it to me," the Empress said faintly. The Empress opened the slip of paper that Xianzhe had presented to her. Her face turned ice-cold with just one look. After reading it, he grabbed the slip of paper in his hand, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into dust. "Lu Qi, you're courting death." The Empress's voice was bone-chilling. She couldn't conceal her murderous aura, causing Renbaqian, who was nearby, to feel a chill run down his spine. "Your Majesty, what happened?" Renbaqian asked softly. General-in-Chief who supports the nation, Protector General of the North, Hongwu, fought with Lu Qi, Lu Pinghai, for 15 minutes. Hongwu was seriously injured, and Lu Qi left with severe injuries. The Empress squeezed out these few words from between her teeth. Xianzhe didn't look surprised when she heard this. Instead, she looked very serious. It seemed like she already knew the contents of the slip of paper. Renbaqian was shocked after hearing this and asked, "How is General Hongwu?" One had to know that Hongwu was the stabilizing force of the Protectorate of the North. If anything happened to him, the Protectorate of the North would definitely be in chaos. Even though his life isn't in danger, he won't be able to fight for a few months, the Empress said coldly. Renbaqian frowned. It was a good thing that his life wasn't in danger. However, Hongwu was seriously injured when Great Xia attacked. This wasn't good news. The importance of having the ninth most powerful expert in the world overseeing the front lines didn't need to be mentioned. Not to mention other things, as long as he killed the other party's commander-in-chief in the midst of the chaos, victory was basically set in stone. The Protector General of the North had always relied on his extremely strong individual strength and the fact that he was one of the top 10 experts in the world. Now that Hongwu was seriously injured, this reliance was halved. Even though he could still command the army, he was greatly affected. After all, this wasn't Earth, where a few top experts could take the head of the commander-in-chief amidst tens of thousands of soldiers. As a result, the mode of war in this world was somewhat different from Earth. It was just like how tens of thousands of Aboriginal soldiers could take decades to defeat hundreds of thousands of Great Xia soldiers. This was impossible on Earth. However, Great Xia was really aggressive this time. It seemed like they weren't as easy to deal with as everyone thought. Just as the Empress was full of murderous intent and Renbachian was pondering, another urgent report arrived. The Empress only took a glance at it, and her murderous intent almost permeated out of Yangxin Palace Hall. In this battle, 7 Spirit Will experts and 78 Intermediate Earth Will experts from Great Xia suddenly attacked Xiongnu and the various generals on the city wall. At the same time, Great Xia launched an attack. The Deputy Protector General of the North, Xiongnu, was killed by 7 Spirit Will experts, and 2 of his opponents died in battle. At the same time, 6 generals from Ziyue City died in battle, and 3 were seriously injured. On the side of Great Xia, 17 Intermediate Earth Will experts were killed, and 21 were injured. Pass down my order. Great Elder, Junior Elder, Minister of the 6 Ministries, and all the officials are to enter the palace for a discussion, the Empress ordered coldly. After Axayanja left, the Empress finally retracted her murderous intent after a long time. Renbachian asked softly, "Your Majesty, did something happen?" The Empress placed the paper on the table. Renbachian read it, and his expression changed. According to this situation, Ziyue City couldn't be defended anymore. Great Xia was indeed the most powerful country in this world. Their first move was a thunderous strike, and it seemed like they wanted to take down Dayo in one fell swoop. Renbachian also frowned. After a while, the Empress left. Renbachian went to the garden outside of Yangxin Palace Hall and sat for a long time. He didn't know how the situation would develop and whether the Aboriginals could withstand it. One had to know that after breaking through Ziyue City, Great Xia could directly enter the hinterland of Dayo. There would be a lot more room for maneuver, and their strategic space and depth would be much greater. On the contrary, it would be much more difficult for Dayo to block this opening. Needless to say, the Protectorate of the North would probably be divided and surrounded by Great Xia. When the Empress returned at night, she didn't have the murderous intent that she had in the afternoon and was much calmer. Renbachian took the initiative to pour a glass of wine for the Empress. "Your Majesty, with the court officials around, we will definitely be able to stop the Great Xia army outside the hinterland. Ziyue City has already been breached," the Empress said. She received this news when she was gathering all the officials for a discussion. It wasn't beyond Renbachian's expectations, but it was faster than he had imagined. "I want to personally lead the army." This sentence from the Empress made Renbachian realize that his peaceful daily life was getting further and further away from him. "I will go with your Majesty," Renbachian immediately replied. His future wife was going to the battlefield, and it was better for him to quickly follow behind. When he returned at night, he would ask the nation for a Vulcan cannon. If he couldn't defeat a Spirit Will expert, anyone below the peak of the Earth Will level would die. Chapter 326. Renbachian's reaction made the Empress very happy. She looked up at him with sparkling eyes and asked, "Do you really want to go with me?" "Of course." Renbochin immediately said, even if it's just playing background music, it's still good to watch your majesty's heroic posture from behind. If things went badly for him, he could still escape with the Empress. However, he definitely couldn't say this out loud. The Empress smiled with a warm look on her face. This was the happiest sentence she had heard all day. However, he still refused. Salt is also an important matter. It doesn't matter if you're in the army or not. However, you're the only one who can handle the salt. Actually, I can do a lot of things in the military. Renbochin laughed. The Empress shook her head slightly and said, salt is an important matter. It's enough for the winged cavalry to follow me. Moreover, there are also 15,000 fierce soldiers from the protectorate of the center. Seeing that the Empress had made up her mind, Renbochin didn't say anything else and asked, Your Majesty, when are you going to depart? The detailed battle report should be sent back in 3 days. The mobilization of the armies of the protectorate of the center will also take a few days. We will set out in 4 days. In that case, I will also set off in 4 days, Renbochin said after thinking for a while. That night, he returned to Earth and sat on the sofa in a daze for a while. He didn't expect things to change so quickly. He didn't know how long this war would last or how it would turn out in the end. He was hesitant about whether he should ask for poison gas from the government. Putting aside the issue of whether the nation would provide the sarin gas, as long as 600 kilograms of sarin gas were thrown over, the front line of Great Xia would be wiped out. But if he did it this time, what about the next time? What about the next time? Would it always be like this in the future? Although it seemed that many fewer people had died and everyone was happy, was such an easy victory really possible? What would the Aboriginals become if they did not experience blood and fire? He felt that he was now standing at a fork in the road of choice, and the outcome of his choice would affect the future development of that world. If they were to use poison gas to obtain victory, at the very least, he would be able to think of many disadvantages. Compared to human lives, it would have a greater impact on the Aboriginals. Such a war would no longer have much to do with the Aboriginals, and he might not necessarily gain any benefits from it. It was also hard to say how the military would view him. After all, the existence of the military had lost most of its value. And the follow-up effects would be much more than that. For example, how would the ancient race view war? They didn't need blood and fire to achieve victory. In the eyes of the Aboriginals, war and human lives had become mere things on paper. Therefore, it was better not to use this move unless it was absolutely necessary. What he wanted to do was to promote the technological development of that world and make that world what he and the Empress wanted to see. One of them was the combination of martial arts and technology to walk the path of that world. Let that world continue to develop according to its own course of war. War could make a nation stronger and able to withstand greater pressure. It could also promote the progress of human civilization. Many things would only change in an environment like war. If they didn't use poison gas to turn the war into a joke, the army would have no meaning to exist. How would they fight wars in the future? He could just throw the bottle. Of course, there was another important point. If he really poisoned hundreds of thousands of people to death, he would probably be surrounded and annihilated. For all she knew, dozens of demon-slaying and devil-subduing groups of righteous people would jump out to kill the boss. If there were people at the level of the top 10 experts, even the Empress wouldn't be able to protect herself. After all, the impact of poisoning hundreds of thousands of frontline soldiers was too great. It was far from comparable to the previous incident. When he understood this point, he felt that he had already detached himself from the dispute between the two countries. Instead, he was using a pair of hands to support the progress of that world. He was like the king of the world. Renbochin looked out of the window with a desolate face and hummed, "How lonely it is to be invincible, how empty it is to be invincible, standing alone at the peak with the cold wind blowing continuously. Who can understand my loneliness? your mother is calling. Your mother is calling. Renbachien, who was feeling infinitely inflated, heard this ringtone and immediately felt like a deflated balloon. He picked up the phone and said meekly, "Mom, what can I do for you? Your mom is going to celebrate her 50th birthday. Do you think you should bring your girlfriend back?" Renbachien was speechless. Let's not talk about when he would be 50 years old. How could he talk about a birthday? The people in that world were already beaten until their brains were out. Why did he still want to hold a 50th birthday celebration? He even wanted the Empress to participate. She was busy killing people now. "Mom, your 50th birthday is a big event. When is it? I will definitely go back to congratulate you and give you a birthday gift to make you proud," Renbachien immediately said in high spirits. Regardless of what he thought, he had to express his attitude. "Are you my biological daughter?" Mama Ren looked doubtful on the other end of the phone. "You don't even know when my birthday is. I've been busy recently and got confused." I will definitely go back when it is." Renbachien laughed. After hanging up the phone, he sent a WeChat message to Renwanyan, "When is Mom's birthday?" After that, he sat there in a daze. After thinking for a while, he gave Shenfeng a call. She was the assistant he hired previously. "Boss." A voice that gave people a very hard feeling came over. Just by listening to the voice, you definitely wouldn't think that she was a woman. Of course, even if you met her face to face, you wouldn't be able to tell. Renbachien suspected that even if he stripped her naked, he wouldn't be able to tell. Is there anything that can allow long-distance communication without satellites, networks, base stations, and electricity? The further the better, Renbachien asked. "Radio stations," Shenfeng answered straightforwardly. "Can that thing work?" Renbachien was surprised. He always thought that this thing required a base station. Our country's military started using it more than 80 years ago. Didn't you see radio stations used in movies about that era? Shenfeng was slightly surprised. Renbachien thought about it. It seemed that there was such a thing, but he had forgotten about it a long time ago. Doesn't it use electricity? At that time, it was hand-cranked and someone cranked it by the side. Now, it's not so troublesome. Solar batteries are enough, Shenfeng explained simply. When Renbachien heard this, he felt that he had seen a scene where a person cranked their hands to generate electricity and a person used a radio station to send messages. Oh, what's the communication range of this thing? It depends on the power output and the environment. Generally speaking, it's 15 to 20 watts. In cities, where the electromagnetic environment is more complicated, it's only a few kilometers to a few dozen kilometers. If the electromagnetic environment is good, it can reach hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. Renbachien was delighted when he heard this. The electromagnetic environment in that world was definitely good. If he had known about this, he would have used it long ago instead of waiting until now. What was war about? It was about information. With this thing, unless it was like Xiongyu, who was ambushed and killed, most people would be able to react in time. Furthermore, the mobilization of troops, support, pincer attack, encirclement, etc., could be done smoothly and without any mistakes. As long as the scouts found out about Great Xiao's military situation, Dayo would be able to respond at any time and make all kinds of preparations. Give me 40 sets. Not too big and easy to operate. The longer the transmission distance, the better, Renbachien immediately said. A few days later, he brought a pile of boxes back to Dayo with a happy look on his face. Your Majesty, I have brought back good stuff. Renbachien came to Yangxin Palace Hall with a face full of joy. Behind him were a few guards carrying a few boxes. Oh. What is it? The Empress was curious when she saw that he was a little excited. A 100-watt shortwave radio station. It can communicate within a range of 1,000 kilometers or even more. No matter where your Majesty is, I will be able to contact you. Similarly, even if your Majesty is in Ping City, the officials in Lon City will also be able to contact you. Furthermore, a fully charged battery can be used continuously for 36 hours. Renbocchen talked non-stop about the knowledge that he had crammed for the past 2 days. After hearing what Renbocchen said, the Empress's face lit up. This thing was indeed very useful. With this, no matter when or where something happened, she would be able to know immediately. In this world, the radio station was considered a divine artifact. How many did you bring? 15 sets. Renbocchen said, leave one in Lon City, one for me, one for your Majesty, one for each of the 5 protectorates. As for the remaining 7 sets, your Majesty can arrange them as you wish. As for the remaining 25 sets, I will bring back 15 sets the next time I go back. As for the remaining 10 sets, I will probably have to go to the mountains to bring them back. At that time, the guards will also send them back to the city. This thing only weighed about 5 kilograms. However, with the addition of batteries, solar panels, and the like, they wouldn't be able to bring too many at once. Chapter 327. Regardless of whether it was the Aboriginals or Great Xia, this war would be the harshest one in decades. Some people felt that using poison was a good choice, and I used to think so too. However, after thinking about it carefully, the consequences would be huge. First, the war would have little to do with the Aboriginals. 100 bottles would be enough to wipe out hundreds of thousands of Great Xia soldiers. What did the war have to do with the Aboriginals? Second, what would the military think? If Renbocchen did this, the value of the military would be halved. Third, it was estimated that the top 10 experts in the world would form a team to assassinate Renbocchen. The danger was too great. Even if he hid in the palace, the Empress wouldn't be able to protect him. Fourth, what would the Aboriginals become if they didn't experience blood and fire? After a long time, would the Aboriginals still be as valiant as they were now? After a few decades, they would become flowers in a greenhouse. Fifth, what would the young Aboriginals think of war and human life? They would not take it seriously or look down on it. A few bottles would solve the problem without blood or sacrifice. Why would they care? I think this point is very important. Sixth, and then on to the 5th point. Since the Aboriginals didn't care about war and human life, what would they think of the people from other countries? Would they kill anyone they didn't like? If the new generation of young people grew up without experiencing war, blood, and fire, and only knew that other countries allowed them to do whatever they wanted, what would happen then? One could imagine how tyrannical it would be. Seventh, war could push forward the progress of human civilization. The major changes in human history were inseparable from war. What Renbocchen wanted to do was to push forward this process of progress and not rely on himself. He wanted to wipe out everything that could be born in this world. There were still many problems with this simple list of 7 points. However, these 7 points were enough. Especially the 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 6th points. This wasn't simply a matter of reducing the number of deaths. It was a matter of the human heart. In times of crisis, it was possible to use poison gas to influence the course of the war. Using a few hundred kilograms of poison gas at the start of the war would make it a joke. The consequences would be equally serious in the future, and it would be more serious than the death of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. Chapter 328. For the next 2 days, Renbocchen went to school during the day and spent the afternoon at the Ministry of Works. He discussed the next 2 important issues with Tong Jingye, which were the blast furnace and the steel injection method. The blast furnace used was similar to the blast furnace used in the Song dynasty. At this time, the blast furnace used was very similar to the modern blast furnace, and it used charcoal instead of coal, which was more suitable for the current Great Xia. However, the lower part was a hydraulic windmill. The wooden wheels were driven by water, and the water impacted the wooden wheels to rotate. Then, the windmill was opened and closed continuously through the axles, tension rods, and other mechanical transmission devices. The wind was stronger, the continuity was better, and the flames were more intense. This method made it easier to obtain pig iron and wrought iron, and it could be produced continuously. The molten iron flowed directly from the side without opening the furnace, and iron ore was added to the top. This alone saved a lot of manpower and resources. The next step was to use the steel injection method to hammer pig iron and wrought iron together, causing the carbon to penetrate each other to form steel. This method could increase the speed of turning iron into steel by several times. Furthermore, there was no need for craftsmen to forge the steel. This process could be done with a hydraulic forging machine, and the craftsman only needed to do the last part. With this process, the speed of forging iron and steel and dayo could be increased by at least 10 times. The next step was to slowly develop. After all, there were many good things that couldn't be produced with dayo's production level. See? The water flows down here, washes the wooden wheels, and the wooden wheels move the tension rods. Then, this hammer will automatically hammer down like this. Renbochin used a small model to explain to everyone. This model was made overnight by the craftsmen over the past 2 days. A small wooden wheel was placed above a wooden trough. When water was poured from the trough, the wooden wheel would rotate with the flow of the water, completing the entire process that Renbochin explained. I see it. Everyone in the courtyard nodded. Tong Jingye, Feng Ho, many officials from the Ministry of Works, and some craftsmen were in the courtyard. They were all staring at a wooden board placed in the middle. On top of it were the models that Renbochin demonstrated to everyone, including the blast furnace and hydraulic forging equipment. Can these 2 types of iron be made into steel just like this? A few of the craftsmen were still hesitant. After forging for their entire lives, it was difficult for them to accept being suddenly told that they should do this. Even more people's faces lit up. Before this, they had never thought that they could actually do this. It didn't seem difficult, but if Renbochin hadn't mentioned these things, they would never have thought of it. Especially at this critical juncture, the things that Principal Ren took out were really useful. Choose a site according to this for the time being. If there are any problems, get someone to inform me immediately. I'm going into the mountains for a period of time, or you can wait for me to come out, Renbochin said to everyone. By the way, if we modify this water wheel a little, we can use it to irrigate the fields. Think about it. Renbochin and Tong Jingye left together. Renbochin said, Sir Tong, I have given you the blueprints, the model, and the things that you need to take note of. The rest is up to you. Tong Jingye nodded. He naturally knew the importance of this matter. Sir Tong, I still have something to do. Follow me to the Great Elder's residence first. Renbochin said. The 2 of them brought along their guards and rushed to the Great Elder's house. Then, they were led by a servant to Shiqing's study room. My lords. When Renbochin and Tong Jingye entered, they saw Shiqing, Kuzhai, Qin Chuan, and the others surrounding a box on the table. Sir Ren, does this thing really have the effect that you said? Qin Chuan asked incredulously. He found it hard to believe that Shiqing suddenly called him here and then told him that this thing could be used to contact people thousands of kilometers away. You will know after trying it out. I have already sent people to Jiaoda yesterday, and it should be about time. Renbochin nodded at everyone. Jiaoda was a small city located 400 kilometers north of Lan City. What's this? Tong Jingye asked curiously. A radio station. Put one in Lon City and one in Ping City respectively. You can use this to contact each other at any time. It's like two people talking to each other without any delay. There's no need for the birds anymore. Ren Baqian's simple explanation shocked Tong Jinye. Do you see this button? This is the switch. First, turn it on, and then adjust the frequency. Ren Baqian explained while reading the instruction manual. How do I use this written on this paper? Tong Jinye immediately asked. Yes. After I leave, you can find a student from the academy to tell you what's written on it. Hey, hey. Hey. Ren Baqian called out to the box on the table. This radio station was equipped with a loudspeaker and a walkie-talkie. That's it. Qin Chuan and the others looked at the box on the table doubtfully. The radio station isn't turned on over there. Wait for a while. They will contact us when they arrive, Ren Baqian explained. After a long time, a rustling sound came from the radio station. Then, someone asked doubtfully, is this how it should be used? Sir Ren seems to have said to use this. Hearing the sound coming from the box, everyone was shocked. Hey, can you hear me? Where are you now? Ren Baqian asked again. Hey, there's actually a sound. The other party was also surprised. Then, they reacted and asked, is it Sir Ren? I'm Su Lo, and I'm now in Jiaoda. It's done. Ren Baqian looked up and smiled at everyone. With this thing, the next battle would be easier. How to pursue, surround, and attack were all discussed through the walkie-talkie. It could be said that all the troops were connected. Where are you in Jiaoda? Qin Chuan asked in a deep voice. Following that, Qin Chuan and Su Lo asked and answered questions. Everyone heard them clearly and no longer had any doubts. Shi Qing and Zhihai were both excited and looked at Ren Baqian with a rather strange look. Why are you looking at me? Ren Baqian felt uncomfortable being stared at. Sir Ren, this thing is called a radio station. I don't know how it's done. Can our children learn these things in the academy? Shi Qing asked curiously. Of course. However, we have to take it one step at a time. They still have a lot to learn to make this thing. Ren Baqian nodded. That's good, that's good. Shi Qing stroked his beard and smiled, looking satisfied. This thing that Ren Baqian took out really showed them how amazing it was. It was even more important than the solar furnace. Sir Ren, are you still accepting students? Zhihai immediately asked after hearing this. He had a few nephews at home who were considered smart and quick-witted. Although he was previously against Ren Baqian, he immediately changed his mind when Ren Baqian took out this thing. Maybe next year or the year after. I should be recruiting another batch, Ren Baqian replied. At present, there were already enough people. In at least a year, 2 outstanding students from the first batch would be selected to lead the new students. Otherwise, he would be exhausted. This group of naughty children was enough to make his blood pressure rise. How many of these things are there? Zhihai asked. This question was also the concern of the others. 40 should be enough. However, only a dozen have arrived so far. The rest will take some time to arrive. Ren Baqian nodded. Leave this radio station here. If you want to contact Her Majesty or me in the future, just use it. Sir Ren, you have done a great service again this time. Tong Jinye laughed heartily with a happy look on his face. Although this thing wasn't under his control, everyone could see its importance. When you come back from the mountains, I will invite you to House Yunyan for a drink. Tong Jinye patted Ren Baqian's shoulder with his big claw. Fortunately, after reaching the man-will level, Ren Baqian's body had become much stronger. If it was in the past, he would have immediately collapsed. Oh, is that so? A woman's voice was suddenly heard from the radio station, causing Tong Jingye to shiver. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! Tong Jingye pointed at the radio station in surprise. He didn't expect to hear Her Majesty's voice. Wasn't Her Majesty in the palace? What's wrong with me? The Empress's voice was heard again. Tong Jingye immediately became submissive and said, I didn't expect to hear Your Majesty's voice from here. I am too surprised and overjoyed. I hope Your Majesty won't take offense. Qin Chuan looked at Tong Jingye and laughed, ignorant old man. If the Empress hadn't spoken just now, he would have dragged Rinpoche out to drink with prostitutes, allowing him to escape this calamity. That's a public channel. Your Majesty also has a radio station, so you can naturally hear it. Rinpoche smiled at Tong Jingye, revealing his white teeth. On the third day, Rinpoche had already arranged for the students in the academy. Among them, 24 had passed the test and were going on an outing in the mountains with him. The remaining 25 had to wait for their endless homework. After coming out of the academy, Rinpoche looked at the palace. The Empress would be leaving tomorrow, and he didn't know how many months she would be gone for. It seemed that during this period of time, the two of them would only be separated for a few days at most. This time, they would be separated for a few months, which made him feel a little uncomfortable. After the Empress left, he would return to Earth and set off for the mountains on his way back. On the way back to the palace, Su Wei suddenly felt that the atmosphere was a little off. There seemed to be a murderous intent. This made him nervous. With a wave of his hand, everyone stopped and began to search for the source of the murderous intent. At this moment, two black iron chains shot out from the ground and entangled Rinpoche and the fork-horned cow he was sitting on. Spirit will experts from Great Xia. Su Wei's facial expression immediately changed. Protect, sir. At the same time, he let out a howl to inform the palace guards nearby. Rinpoche's facial expression also changed drastically. The two iron chains emitted a bone-piercing chill. He felt as if he was frozen, and his whole body stiffened. Then, he saw a man coming down from the sky on a sword. He exerted force with his feet, and the huge sword immediately flipped in the air and landed in his hand. The sword was twice the size of his body, and it slashed toward the people below like a meteor. Rinpoche, who bore the brunt of the attack, widened his eyes and looked horrified. Then, he suddenly disappeared from the scene. At the same time, the chains that entangled him and the fork-horned cow also disappeared, leaving the fork-horned cow in the middle of the scene with an innocent look on its face. A person 100 meters away suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and cried out mournfully, "Where's my immortal binding chain?" Blood flowed from his mouth, his eyes were filled with horror, and his whole body was lifeless. One had to know that this iron chain was a heaven-grade weapon that was condensed from his divine sense. It was nourished by him every day and was connected to him as one. But now, it was actually gone. 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 In an instant, it disappeared along with the target. He couldn't sense it at all. Chapter 329. The person holding the huge sword was a middle-aged man in a green robe. The huge sword in his hand was twice as tall as him, and his whole body was like a meteor falling to the ground. As long as he could kill this person, it would be worth it even if he couldn't leave. The middle-aged man thought to himself. His eyes revealed a slight look of pity. It was a pity that he had been at the spirit will level for nearly 100 years, and it was difficult for him to advance further. Now that his time was almost up, he wouldn't have to do such a thing. As for the people below and Rinpoche, they were already dead in his eyes. However, just as his sword was about to hit the top of everyone's head, a scene that made his eyes widen appeared. That poison warrior actually disappeared together with another spirit will expert's immortal binding rope. How is this possible? The man was shocked, but the power of the huge sword increased instead of decreasing. Su Wei, who was coming up from below, was slashed into the ground. His bones were full of cracks, and blood was spurting out of his mouth. His falling momentum was only slightly hindered. Su Wei, who was equivalent to the peak of the earth will level, was like a toddler in the face of this man's attack. He could only block it slightly before dying. With a roar, a huge gully that was 2 feet wide and 3 feet long appeared on the ground with Renbochin at the center. Su Wei and the 4 guards closest to him were all dead. After the man landed, he swept his huge sword around in a circle, and immediately, there was a rain of blood. The guards who rushed up were all swept away, and a few mounts were severed at the neck. "You're courting death." An ice-cold voice full of anger came from the palace wall. The Empress looked at the tragic scene below with bloodshot eyes. Purple veins appeared under her skin, and her hair turned from black to red. Although she rushed out of the palace as soon as she sensed the aura outside, she was still 1 step too late. The Empress pounced down from the palace wall at a speed that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. The man felt the immense power and monstrous killing intent of the Empress, and he slashed with his huge sword. The Empress only slightly twisted her body in the air to avoid the huge sword and grabbed the top of the man's head with her palm. Although the man sensed the Empress's movement, he was still a step too slow. He felt a sharp pain on his head and immediately groaned. The Empress already had a handful of black hair and a bloody scalp in her hands. "I want you to die a horrible death. I'm going to exterminate your entire clan." The Empress's voice was filled with boundless killing intent and brutality. Her figure flashed and appeared in front of the man. With one hand, she grabbed the divine weapon that was sweeping towards her, and with the other, she grabbed his face. That man let out an inhuman howl. His entire face was clawed off by the Empress. Following that, a red shadow spun around the man. The man's body was repeatedly thrown away, but he was unable to escape from the Empress's shadow. The miserable cries grew weaker and weaker. When the Empress stopped, all that was left of the man was a set of ghastly white bones. More than half of his internal organs were gone, and his flesh and blood were scattered everywhere within a radius of 100 meters. "Who? Phew!" The Empress panted loudly, and the redness in her eyes didn't decrease at all. Instead, it became even more intense. The lines on his body were also more obvious. "Your Majesty!" A voice called out from the side. Immediately, the Empress's eyes flickered with a red glow as she looked over. Her face turned even paler. Her exposed skin was covered with purple veins, making her look even more bizarre and seductive. "Your Majesty, Sir Ren isn't among them," Tong Zhenye said carefully. Given the Empress's current state, he really couldn't take a kick. Upon hearing this, the Empress's eyes narrowed slightly. The red glow in her eyes began to weaken, and the lines on her body began to fade. When Sir Ren was attacked just now, he suddenly disappeared. Tong Zhenye arrived a little later than the Empress, and the Empress took a full 10 minutes to kill that man. This was enough time for him to find out the whole story from the other Imperial guards. Upon hearing this, the Empress finally calmed down. Just now, when she was on the wall, she only saw a patch of blood below and a huge gully on the ground. She didn't even dare to look for Renbochin's corpse. At this moment, after hearing Tong Zhenye's words, she immediately understood that Renbochin had returned to Earth. This filled her with ecstasy, as if she had regained the most precious thing in her heart after losing it. Her body immediately lost most of its strength. Just now, she thought that Renbochin had been attacked and killed. After all, with Renbochin's strength, he wouldn't even have the chance to escape from a great Xia spirit will expert. "It's a pity that 5 Imperial guards died in battle, and 7 were seriously injured," Tong Zhenye said with slight regret. "Give him an extravagant burial," the Empress said after a moment of silence. Just now, 2 spirit will experts attacked, and there's still one more, Tong Jinye reminded her. The Empress's eyes flashed coldly. Not far away, there was another person being ganged up on. A spirit will expert was facing 4 high-ranking officials whose strength was equivalent to that of a spirit will expert. Tai Yan from the Department of Inspection, Bai Shiying from the Public Order Department, Zhu Ju from the Department of the Army, and Tao Yin from the Department of Cavalry. None of them were weaker than a spirit will expert, let alone a spirit will expert who was seriously injured and whose spirit will had disappeared. If it weren't for the fact that they wanted to keep him alive, that spirit will expert would have died 100 times over. At the side, Qin Chuan, Tu Wan, and the others were standing on top of the wall. At this moment, the Empress's condition was too terrifying, so it was better to stay here. Tai Yan and Bai Shiying's faces turned ashen. Someone actually tried to assassinate them in the city, and the assassin was Principal Ren. You guys are courting death, yet you still want to drag us along. The 2 of them had the heart to cut this person into 8 pieces. A red shadow descended from the sky and directly stepped on the shoulder of that spirit will expert, pinning him to the ground. The sound of bones breaking was heard, and blood spurted out of that person's mouth. It looked like he was going to die soon. The Empress looked at her feet and then coldly looked at Tai Yan and Bai Shiying. Your Majesty. Everyone greeted in unison. Investigate their identities. I want to exterminate their 9 generations. The Empress was overflowing with murderous intent. Your Majesty, the other person should be Zhao Zhichuan from the 6 Swords sect in Mount Jiazi. That sword is his heaven-grade weapon, Zhu Yi, Tai Yan immediately answered. When he first arrived, he took a look and already knew who it was. After all, someone who could condense a heaven-grade weapon was considered a top expert in the world. It was unlikely that he was unknown. As for this person, I don't know if he didn't use his heaven-grade weapon to hide his identity, Tai Yan said doubtfully. No matter how he tried to hide his identity, he shouldn't have been beaten to death without using his trump card, right? How did such a stupid person cultivate to the spirit will level? How did he condense a heaven-grade weapon? His heaven-grade weapon is an iron chain, Tong Jinye said with a strange look on his face. However, he had disappeared for some reason. There are only 3 people in the Great Xia dynasty who are able to use metal chains to lock people up. Apart from Elder Zhu, who was killed by His Majesty, there's Qiu Yu from the Ministry of Justice of the Great Xia dynasty. The last person is the celestial gathering town of Josie Mountain. Tai Yan answered respectfully. After all, it was impossible for Qiu Yu to appear here to assassinate the Empress. Qiu Yu's appearance didn't match either. It was said that Qiu Yu had the appearance of an elegant and handsome man. My immortal binding rope. The man at the Empress's feet struggled to squeeze out a few words from between his teeth before he breathed his last. He didn't forget the immortal binding rope even before he died. It was the foundation of his life, and he still didn't understand why it disappeared. It's indeed Luo Jin. Tai Yan nodded. The 2 of you. The Empress pointed at Tai Yan and Bai Shiying. Your Majesty, please punish us for our incompetence, the 2 of them said in unison. The 2 of you will receive 50 scaly whips, the Empress said coldly. Even though she knew that a spirit will expert had sneaked in and the Public Order Bureau and the Department of Inspection wouldn't be able to detect it, she wasn't prepared to let it go so easily. This kind of scaly whip was made from the tail of a beast. When it was swung, the scales on it would explode and it was extremely heavy. An ordinary person would be badly mutilated with 1 lash. Even a spirit will expert would be bedridden for 3 days after suffering 50 lashes. Ren Baqian's eyes were wide open as he panted on the ground. The power of the sword strike just now was too terrifying. It gave him the feeling that if he was struck by it, not even dregs would be left. He wouldn't even need to be cremated. Even though the Empress was in the palace not far away, the enemy's sudden attack left even the Empress unable to save him in time. Fortunately, he made a prompt decision to return to Earth. He still hadn't recovered from the shock, and his heart rate soared to 180 beats per minute. After a long time, he finally regained his senses and began to rub the ground. How did he bring this iron chain back? Was this the heaven-grade weapon that the Empress mentioned? This thing was condensed from divine sense and mental strength. Yet, he actually brought it back as if it was an actual object. How was he going to untie it? Renbochin fell into another dilemma. This thing was binding him, and he couldn't even move his fingers. Furthermore, this thing was bone-piercingly cold. He couldn't possibly be tied up like this and return to Dayo after 2.5 days, right? He would freeze to death before he could return. Chapter 330. Renbochin had only heard about heaven-grade weapons from the Empress, so he knew very little about them. What happened now was beyond his expectations. A heaven-grade weapon that was condensed from the spirit was actually brought to another world. Furthermore, it was in its physical form. This didn't conform to common sense. "Sir, let's make a deal, shall we? Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Do you believe that I won't call the fire department now? Don't think that I can't do anything to you just because you're a transmigrator." Renbochin rubbed on the ground like a bug. After rubbing for a long time and discussing with the metal chain for a long time, the other party didn't respond at all. He was helpless. What should he do? He couldn't even pick up the phone now. His body was getting colder and colder. Renbochin felt that he was going to freeze. He would probably become an ice sculpture by the time he returned to Dayo in 2 days. He didn't know if he could be saved by heat. Renbochin was already considering whether he should think of a way to leave a message to the Empress to indicate that he could still be saved. Unfortunately, he couldn't even do such a simple thing. When exactly did the housekeeper come? Hurry up and call the police. Renbochin looked at the sky. It was actually evening now and immediately sighed. This is such a depressing way to die. Renbochin shivered. He tried to stand up, but he couldn't do it. At this moment, Renbochin felt that he was completely frozen. If this went on, he probably wouldn't be able to hold on until tomorrow. A feeling of grievance welled up in his heart. He wasn't married yet. Ah! Just as Renbochin felt his body getting colder and colder, he began to recall the past. His mind was filled with the Empress. Every frown, smile, indifference, charm, and occasional naughtiness made him feel nostalgic. Unfortunately, the warmth in his heart couldn't change the coldness in his body. At this moment, the metal chain on Renbochin's body suddenly moved. However, Renbochin's body was already numb from the cold and couldn't feel it at all. However, he soon realized that the metal chain was moving around his body. This change surprised him. He didn't know what happened, but it was better than nothing. Renbochin carefully sensed the movement of the metal chain, trying to find a chance of survival. The metal chain circled around Renbochin's body twice. Then, it raised its head high like a snake. Following which, before Renbochin could react, the front end of the metal chain plunged into Renbochin's forehead. It was as if it was going to pierce through Renbochin's forehead. The metal chain drilled into Renbochin's forehead. In just a few seconds, the metal chain pierced into his brain. F***ck, what happened? Renbochin wanted to move, but his entire body was frozen stiff. He could only move his fingers. After a long time, his body recovered a little. He touched his forehead, trying to see if there was a hole there. However, the place where his fingers touched was as smooth as new. She forced herself up from the ground and walked to the bathroom with the help of the wall. She looked at her forehead in the mirror, but there was nothing on her forehead. Everything that happened just now was like an illusion. What's the situation now? Renbochin looked at himself in the mirror and started to ponder. After a while, he had a guess. The iron chain was a divine weapon. In the end, it was a product condensed from the divine soul. As for the divine soul, it was probably the spiritual force or the soul, right? Renbochin didn't know much about this and could only speculate based on the name. In that case, did this metal chain fuse with his soul? Or was it entrenched in his soul? Renbochin didn't feel any changes in his body, but he didn't feel any changes. In that case, it would remain in the soul. Don't tell me they're treating me as food. Renbochin was shocked by this idea. This thing relied on the so-called spirit to condense. Now that it had come to this world and lost its connection with its original owner, it had entered his body. It couldn't be trying to treat him as an object, right? Or should he rely on himself to nourish it? He hoped it was the latter and not the former. After looking at the mirror for a long time, Renbochin couldn't see anything and couldn't think of anything. Even if he returned to Deo, the Empress might not be able to do anything. After all, he had never heard of such a thing. In the past, after the master died, the divine weapon would also dissipate. This divine weapon was brought back to Earth before its owner died, and its connection with its original owner was cut off, resulting in the current situation. That master should be dead by now, right? After all, it was impossible for the person who tried to assassinate him right next to the palace to live. If he was still alive, he would be out of luck. When he returned, he didn't know what would happen. After thinking for a long time, Renbochin rubbed his head and felt a headache. He went upstairs, took out his phone, and called the laboratory. Then, he went downstairs and drove straight to the laboratory. He wanted to check his body to see if there were any changes. In the laboratory, Su Shan and 2 assistants were waiting for Renbochin. After a detailed check, there was nothing wrong. However, Renbochin still didn't feel at ease. After all, he didn't know what kind of effect someone else's divine weapon would have on his body. Renbochin only returned home when it was close to midnight. After lying on the bed, he tried his best to enter the visualization of wood. After all, he couldn't stop improving his strength at any time. This incident made him feel a real sense of crisis. However, when he entered the visualization of wood, his eyes immediately froze. He saw that the iron chain was wrapped around the big tree, pretending to be a vine. Upon closer inspection, it was exactly the same as one of the vines wrapping around the big tree, and it was mixed in with the other vines. But that dark color, that sharp charm, that bright, that outstanding, no matter how hard one tried to hide it, one would be able to recognize it at a glance. Do you think I'm blind? Renbochin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After standing under the tree for a long time, he began to climb up the giant tree. When he was about 2 meters up, he could already touch one end of the iron chain. When he touched it with his hand, it wasn't as cold as before. It was as if it was really an ordinary iron chain. However, that iron chain twisted slightly. It was as if Renbochin's touch made it a little uncomfortable, but it didn't forcefully endure it and continued to pretend to be a vine. Renbochin's hand immediately froze. When he took a closer look at the iron chain, it didn't move at all. It was as if Renbochin was hallucinating just now. Renbochin touched it again, but the iron chain still didn't move. Even Renbochin started to think that it might be an illusion. At this moment, that iron chain twisted again. Renbochin immediately had a look of surprise on his face. This thing is actually alive. However, after thinking about it, it seemed to be the case. After all, it took the initiative to burrow into his mind, which meant that it might really be alive. This made Renbochin's mood even worse. After all, an object formed by someone else's spirit was still alive in one's soul or sea of knowledge. No one would be in a good mood. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.